We're live streaming.
Okay, great. Welcome to our official webinar for tonight's business agenda meeting for the school board for April 2nd. Okay, great. Welcome to our official webinar for tonight's business agenda meeting for the school board for April 2nd. Okay, great. Welcome to our official webinar. Okay, I'm not sure where the feedback came from, but that kind of threw me off just a little bit. I apologize. We're still working this out. We had a really good session to go through how to utilize the Zoom technology for folks who maybe are watching on YouTube. Just a couple of things to note. Tonight's meeting might take just a little bit longer as we're navigating through how to make sure that we're getting the roll call votes, which will be a little bit different. Instead of folks raising their hand and doing the count, we will actually be calling based on attendance, and the members will state either yes or no that they accept or towards the motion. So it might take a little bit more. We will need to be recognizing speakers instead of, usually there's a lot of conversation that happens. We'll be using raising hands, making sure that we're, waiting so that we're not talking over one another throughout tonight's meeting. And for folks, if there's folks in the attendees who wish to make a public comment during our public comment time, even though you did sign into the system, for the record, as it's being filmed on YouTube, please do state your name, your address, and the town if you are not a Scarborough resident. So with that, if I could have a call to order, try this again. Are there any adjustments to tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none. Check to see if there's any public comments on tonight's agenda items. It doesn't look as though there are. Alicia?
Did you check the email too?
I did. There was no emails.
I was just going to ask if the protocol has been shared for the YouTube viewers and any attendees, how they would submit the question.
No. I believe that they're able to come over to the Zoom system to type in a question if they didn't want to provide a public statement. But I don't believe the chat functionality is on for YouTube or being monitored based on the fact that, we have a very specific period of time where we are open for public comments as a board. So it's really not an open question and answer, which is a little different than how council runs their meetings.
So if I understand you correctly, if an individual wants to make a public comment, it needs to occur first during the public comment period. They also need to leave the YouTube session and go to the Zoom session as an attendee, and then they would submit it through the question and answer. Is that right?
That's correct.
No, you can submit it. No, if you don't want to be if you don't want to participate in Zoom at all, you can submit a question through a specific email that we set up. It's public comment at scarboroughschools.org.
There's also Q&A at the screen. I think that Kylie just did this as an attendee. You can submit a question there.
Right, but if you are not part of Zoom at all and you're only watching on YouTube, the way for you to submit a public comment would be to write it to that specific email address, because that's what's being monitored during the public comment session. So if you have something that you want to say, you can write it in email and it will be read out loud. If you are using the Zoom process, and you are an attendee, you can raise your hand. There's like a little area for you to raise your hand, and you can be promoted to be so we can hear your audio, and you can give a public statement that way. Or like you said, Nick, you can also go onto the Q&A. Those are the three ways that we're monitoring public comments.
April?
I know this is a little bit odd because we've already done a workshop and so we already did roll call, but I believe that in order for us to function legally speaking, we need to do an audio and sound check before we conduct business as a board. So when you call the meeting to order, we need to do some kind of sound check to make sure that every member of the board can both hear and be heard.
Thank you. So perhaps we should just go back to doing the roll call, Diane, if you wouldn't mind taking attendance.
No problem at all. Ms. Durgan,
Here.
Mrs. Giftos,
Here.
Dr. Gill,
Here.
Ms. Casalunas,
Here.
Ms. Layton,
Here.
Mrs. Seither,
Here?
Mrs. Turner,
Here.
Ms. Caldwell,
Here.
and Mr. Bennett.
Here.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, April. Both you and Alicia still have your hands up. Did you have additional comments?
I just was going to ask if you could repeat that email address for the public.
Sure, it's publiccomment@scarboroughschools.org.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Just want to confirm that there are no public comments. Okay, for that, we'll close out for that section. 4.0, the superintendent's report. 4.1 is an update on the funding formula. And we'll see if I remember how to bring Kate into the meeting. I think I did it.
Hello, this is Kate.
Oh, wait, hold on, let's do this. I think I promoted you to be a panelist.
You can still hear me, I think, but you can't see me,
I don't know why.
I'm guessing.
There should be something up in the top right corner that says like allow video or something. It should be next to the mute. That's what it is on mine, at least.
Aha.
That did it. Thank you. I'm in. Here I am. Can y'all hear me? Awesome. Okay, so Leanne, you're in control of the slide deck, I think. If you could,
Hold on, let's see if I can remember to do this. I think there's a way I can give it to you.
oh, that's interesting. My link isn't in there.
Oh,
So, how about if I try sharing my screen?
yep, let's do this.
If you can move that.
Okay, I think I've given you access to, oh, you're controlling my screen. Hold on. Let's try this. And I think you can take control now that I'm not sharing.
All right, so let's find out whether I can get to. Sorry, I'm pretty sure I had it linked in there, but Lord knows where it went. So bear with me for 1 sec here. And we're looping around.
Leanne, you still have to share your screen. Oh, never mind.
All right, well, that was a big loop. Let's see if this works now. So, hi, everybody. This is a short overview of a very complex topic. And if we find that board members have deeper questions, we can certainly schedule more time in the future to address them. But this is just to tackle some of the basic elements that I've been asked about. So let me head in here, and if folks have questions, please feel free to jump in and stop me. Can we see this on the screen here? Do I need to do anything fancy?
I say I can see it.
Great.
Everybody's good? Okay. So this is a definition of general purpose aid, or GPA, as defined by the Maine Department of Education, very helpfully on their website. And the idea behind the EPS formula, which stands for Essential Programs and Services, is for the state to figure out a way to distribute aid out through all the school districts in the state of Maine equitably. You see that they want students to have an equitable opportunity to achieve the Maine learning results. So the EPS formula is the label that they put on the process that they use to figure out how to send subsidy to local schools. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, how do they figure out what's an essential program or service for a school district? I'm going to share, and I don't want anybody to screech because this is really tiny, but I don't expect y'all to see all these little tiny numbers. I'm just going to walk you through a couple of quick things on these pages so that you'll understand what you're looking at without having to dig deep and get your cheaters on. I know Diana's reaching for her glasses right now. So the point of this spreadsheet, this is called the ED 279. And this is the document that's created for each school department. And I can use my cursor a little bit here as a pointer. This is the document that's created for each school department each fiscal year. You can see it says 2020-21 here. So this is the one that they've provided for us for next school year. The EPS formula, as you can tell, it looks really complicated and scary. And we business managers all say that the only person who truly understands the EPS formula is the guy who wrote it, whose name is Jim Ryer, and he's a complete genius. But the rest of us muddle through and sort of try to understand the basics of it. I'm going to go back here. Let's see how well I do this, to the slide and say, essential programs and services calculations. On these first couple of pages, what they're looking at is the number of students that we have in our district, elementary and secondary, and that's why we do those student counts and report them to Department of Ed every year. Increases and decreases in enrollment are really impactful here. So if you're a district whose economy is more or less the same, and we'll talk about the way that they decide how much you can afford a little bit later on. But if you have a large increase in student count, or you have a small increase, if you have no increase in student count, or if you have a decrease in student count, that's definitely going to impact your formula, because the state is going to decide how much money you need based on the number of kids you have. They also look at the number of staff that we have. They use a recommended staff-student ratio to figure out how many staff members we have, but also how many they think we should have based on our student count. I'm going to flip back to the 279 here for a second so you can see this first part here, attending pupils here at the top, staff positions, a little bit on benefits, and then you get into some other items here, supplies and equipment, that's where your system administration is allowed to be, and your operations and maintenance, that's facilities. And for each of those, they're basically giving you a little bit of an allocation based on the number of students that you have in your district. So that's the first page. The second page includes adjustments and targeted funds. We'll see what that looks like. Oh, poo, I shut it. I was doing pretty well there with my back and forth, but you know, we're learning here, right? Okay, so on page 2, you get some what they call targeted counts. So they're looking at students who are maybe needing extra English language support, students who may be disadvantaged and might need additional supports in school, some assessment resources, some technology resources. And essentially what they're trying to do here is they're trying to balance out the needs of a variety of different types of students. So it's not just a teacher is a teacher and a student is a student, but they're recognizing that there may be differences in the type of instruction that you need to provide. On the third page, they give us a chunk of money based on a few actual expenditures from the prior year. One is in gifted and talented, expenditures from, it's actually 2 years ago because fiscal year 20 is still ongoing. Special education, and that's going to be important in a little bit. Special education, out of district tuition, transportation, and if you have an approved bus purchase, they put that in there as well. So all of these items are folded into the EPS formula. And I'm trying to figure out how I scroll without making everybody throw up here, sorry. Okay, so at the bottom of page 3, we get to the total FY21 allocation. So once each district's allocation is determined, the bottom of page 3, you see this total combined allocations. All right, so now we're at the point where the state thinks it knows how much it costs to deliver education in the town of Scarborough. You might notice that they think right now that for FY21, it costs $35 million, say $36 million. Their allocation for us is $35.9. And just for comparison, Scarborough's actual budget this year, not next year, is $51.4 million. So clearly the EPS formula doesn't actually match up with our reality. And most districts, particularly in our region, spend significantly more than what the EPS formula identifies as essential. And there are a number of reasons for that. EPS is designed to be bare bones, just the minimum that it would take to deliver instruction. There are a lot of things that aren't included in there. Capital costs, there are debt services not included for Scarborough because we are locally funded on our construction projects. So the point here is just that EPS is not going to pay all of our bills. It's an idea of how much they think that Scarborough could get by with. And even though it's not what we would consider to be exactly accurate, it does put us all on a level playing field with all the other districts in the state. So they're calculating everybody in the same way. And some districts are able to spend more than that. And Scarborough happens to be in that situation. So then once the district's EPS allocation is determined, so that's our $35 million, the required local contribution is calculated. So the required local contribution is the piece of this appropriation for schools that the state believes Scarborough can pay. The key factors in determining required local contribution are your valuation as a town, as provided by Maine Revenue Service each year. So the formula is using a property valuation for each town as a shortcut to figure out the community's ability to pay for education locally. They're not using the valuation that each town is providing, but Maine Revenue Services does check in with the towns, and they do their own calculation. They figure out their own formula for what the valuation and property values of a town should be. But they do that in consultation with the town. So you take the EPS allocation. Oops, I've done it again, sorry. The EPS allocation, remember that's the $35 million that they think it's going to take to run schools in Scarborough next year. You subtract the required local contribution, and that's how you get your state contribution. That's how they decide how much subsidy you get. So I'm going to go back to the 279 just for a second here. And I'm going to go to the next page. And here we have the $35 million here. Here we have the valuation, the state valuation for Scarborough for FY21, or the one that they're using for the FY21 budget, which is $4 billion, kind of a nice round number there. And then they multiply that by a mill rate, and they use a mill rate in much the same way that the town uses a mill rate, but it's the same across the whole state. So let's say our mill rate, for the sake of convenience with this process, is $10. So Scarborough's ability to pay is going to be $10 times their state valuation. Holton's ability to pay is going to be $10 times their state valuation. And the idea is that the mill rate stays the same, but the proportion of spending that's allocated to the local municipality, which is over here, will change based on the valuation of the town. And then you get down to the bottom here and they say, okay, well, here's what we think it costs to run schools in Scarborough in FY21. Here's how much we think the community should pay, and here's how much we're going to give you. And that's how EPS works. Very bad at this piece. I guess.
Can I ask you a quick question? When
Yeah.
we say we talk a lot about being minimum receivers, does that mean that the amount that we get from the state is lower than their lowest amount? So we just get whatever their lowest amount is?
Yeah, we'll talk about that on the next slide.
Okay, sorry.
Thanks for the intro. So yeah, so what's a minimum receiver? A minimum receiver under state statute, the statute says that all communities have to be provided with at least a minimum amount of state funding. And there are two ways of calculating that minimum. One is based on per pupil costs, and one is based on a percentage of your special education actual expenses. Again, it's from 2 years prior, because that's the year that they have closed up before they start calculating the new subsidy for next year. So in Scarborough's case, the calculation, the lowest number is, the calculation is the percentage of special education costs. And for FY21, they're giving us 50% of what we actually spent in FY19 on special education. So if we go back and look at the ED 279 and we go to the next page, remember they were going to give us $2.4 million, right? And so we go down here and we say, okay, here's your total allocation. Here's what the state's going to give you. Local contribution, state contribution, $2.4 million. Great. However, our 50% of special education costs was $4 million. So the state can't just say, I'm going to give you $2.4 million. They have to add back, they have to subtract from the local contribution and add to the state contribution to get to that $4 million, which is what they're giving us for subsidy now. So that's how the minimum receiver thing works. If you are in a place where your valuation and your costs make it such that you are paying more than what you spent in special education, then the state has to make it good. They have to go back and they have to use the statute to adjust your total. Does that make sense?
Yeah, why is it that you said there were two ways. One was a per pupil cost and one was a percentage of special education. Why is Scarborough a percentage of special education and not per pupil?
Because it's the higher of the two. So if we use their numbers for the per pupil cost, there's actually a formula with, dollar amounts for per pupil. Some districts might calculate that out and they might make out better using that number because they have lower special education costs. In our case, if you calculate the per pupil cost, our special education costs actually exceed that. So we get to take the higher of those two numbers as our subsidy amount. So I'm gonna go back here for a second, and we're gonna go right here, and we're gonna see that as we just saw in the 279, even though I made you put your glasses on, I'm gonna tell you what you saw. The FY21 state share as calculated through EPS is the $2.4 million. The FY21 state share based on our minimum receiver status is the $4 million. Then a little bit further down on that same page, there are a few adjustments that the state makes. All this stuff in gray here are all adjustments that they make after they've made the calculation of what your subsidy should be. And one of the things that's in this lower category is the incentive that they give us for belonging to a regional service center. And this is why it was so important for us last year when we were trying to get the community to vote to join the Greater Sebago Alliance. And it's just money in the bank for us. So that $84,000 for next year is money that we will receive purely by our virtue of our membership in that regional organization, because the state wants to incentivize those collaborations. So you get to the bottom here and you get the $4.125 million. And that is the subsidy that we can expect to receive next school year. All right, so I'm going to go back to that one more sec here. And before we move on, I'll just make sure that we don't have any questions about that. Everybody good on how we landed with that? I will say that the minimum receiver statute has changed a little bit over time. Built into the statute are a number of escalators. So for example, when we first hit minimum receiver status, it was in fiscal year 2018. And we were given that year the value of 33% of our special education costs in 2016. That was when we hit the bottom. That was the first year that we were minimum receivers. In 2019, the calculation increased and we got 40% of reported costs for the next year. And this year it's 45%, and next year it's 50%. So the cool thing is that the state statute has built in an attempt to make minimum receivers' lives better at the same time that they're trying to increase education subsidy across the state. The advantage of being a minimum receiver is that there's very little volatility to it. You don't really have to go through the formula and figure out if you added kids or lost kids, or if your valuation changed, or you know, they're waiting for the state to make sure that they're putting the right amount of money into GPA for the next fiscal year. Minimum receiver is kind of an easy thing to figure out. So as long as Scarborough remains a very prosperous community as compared with our friends and neighbors here in the state of Maine, this is likely to be our situation. And it does make things pretty easy, and it does help us achieve a little bit of an increase in subsidy each year, as opposed to some of the really dreadful cuts in subsidy that we had in the years between 2009 and 2018. So the last thing that I was asked to speak to is about tax increment financing or credit enhancement agreements, or some of the ways in which communities will leverage financing through tax collection to encourage economic development. And so the questions that I've heard and some of the reading that I've done, I'm absolutely not an expert in this area, but I do get the basic gist of it, and it's something to think about. If you have a tax increment financing or a TIF agreement in your community, what you're doing is you are segregating future property tax revenues from a specific development project. So think about the Downs, because we've been talking about that. You separate those tax revenues and you divert them and you dedicate them and utilize them to support the growth of that project. So those property tax revenues from that project are used to finance infrastructure, or they're folded back into the project. And the idea behind that is to incentivize economic development, is to help developers create something new and valuable in your community without taking on the full impact of property tax in the beginning years of that development. So what can happen is that a TIF can shelter an increase in your valuation resulting from economic development. So for example, if the state revenue service comes through and they're doing their valuation for Scarborough, in the first years when the Downs is involved in this TIF agreement, that property value does not count in the state's calculations, which means that in a sense, the state calculation is lower than what it could be if they were counting the value of that property. And state valuation impacts a lot of things. It impacts the EPS formula, obviously, because we just talked about that. It also impacts state revenue sharing for the municipality. And it's a piece of how they figure out how to assess county taxes as well. So there's sort of a school of thought around economic development policy in communities to consider the potential of a TIF to potentially help you gain more public funding from your state. And I think, you know, some folks have been talking about that and what does that really mean? In Scarborough right now, because of the minimum receiver statute and because of our status financially already, it really doesn't mean anything right now, because you've all seen that the valuation was calculated into the EPS formula, and then it was basically tossed out and trumped by the minimum receiver statute. So whatever our valuation had been and whatever our local share had been, in the end, it wouldn't matter because the state would have to go by our special education costs anyway. If Scarborough were ever in a position where we were not a minimum receiver, if we started to decline in comparison to our neighbor communities, for example, and we stepped out of that situation, then it would be something to consider. And if you're looking at economic development strategies, what you're trying to do is you're trying to weigh the offset of the potential loss of taxes, because you're not going to collect those tax revenues to run your town anymore. If you're in a TIF, you're taking the taxes from that project and you're putting them into the project in one way or another. You're supporting the project. So you don't have it for general fund tax revenues. So if you don't have that revenue coming in, is there a chance that your lower valuation will allow you to receive more revenue from the state? So there's a little math problem there. And that's, I think, what people have been sort of pondering and talking about what that impact might look like. So again, not an expert in this area, but that's my understanding of it. So if there's questions, I'm happy to try to field them. Have I put you all to sleep?
No.
Come on, Hillary, give me a question.
Okay, I'm wondering, and I'm just going to pose this to the board. This is super complicated. There's a lot to this. I think this helps walking into the meetings over the next few days as we start digging into the budget, and it gives that baseline. But we may want to consider doing a workshop and we can collect questions that the board has if that's something that other folks would like to do.
Yeah, I think, Leanne and I had talked early on about the fact that this is a pretty deep subject and there's a lot of bits to it. So if folks are having wonders in particular areas where we can get more information, I'd be happy to try to pull that together and probably lean on some other folks as well to lend their expertise.
Kristen?
Yeah, I do think this was, a good overview going into the budget, but I would definitely like to have a workshop because I know I have oodles of questions that are probably getting really nitty gritty, and I'm not sure if now is the time to ask them all. So I would like a workshop if we could.
Nick?
So for me, this was actually, this clarified a major misconception that I had, and I may not be the only one, or maybe I am, but it's that I always thought when everyone talked about minimum receivership, in my head, I had this idea that that means we're getting the least amount of money possible. And it was like some set amount, like the very bottom of the barrel in terms of defining equitable. And when I look at it now, I actually think the designation of being a minimum receiver doesn't have a whole lot to do with the dynamics of our school. It has to do with the value of our town. And then we have to basically we're giving two options because we're a minimum receiver. I guess now I'm looking at that label as more of the cause than the effect, if that makes sense. And I guess that was something I didn't realize up until this. So thank you, Kate. And I hope I got that right. If I didn't get it right, then I did not then the epiphany is gone.
then I'm not a good teacher.
No.
I think that's exactly right. The minimum receiver status has to do with the economic health of your community as compared with the economic health of communities around you. So every year it could change based on how the people around you are doing, but we happen to be in a region where it's not likely to change significantly in comparison with our friends and neighbors. We're so far, I would say, above the threshold. I mean, you saw the change, right? It was like $2.4 million to $4 million. That's a big jump. So, and if we were to creep closer, then it would certainly be a place where we'd start to say, oh, maybe we're coming out of minimum receivership. But I just don't see that for Scarborough. It doesn't make sense with our economic status as it compares with other communities in Maine.
April?
So I'm the one who brought this to
April, I'm not hearing you. Is it just me?
No, I think she
No,
froze.
I lost her.
Did she lose audio?
April, you're back.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah, there you are.
Okay, I'll switch to phone in just a second too. So I had brought this to Kate at the finance level, at the committee level, because I was hearing chatter in the community about it. And I wanted to make sure that us as a board, that we were prepared to handle these kinds of questions should they come up when we go out to discuss the budget with the community. So Kate, I really appreciate the high level overview that you gave. I think it answers some of the questions that I had. I second Kristen's recommendation that we still do some kind of workshop to further discuss this, because I also have other questions, but I feel like before we get into the weeds too far, it would be okay if I put those on hold for now.
Well, and perhaps if we can collect those questions through the chair, we could craft something that would answer them, and, you know, make sure that everybody feels confident in talking about these things. I will say again that none of us in the business manager world actually completely fully understand EBS, but I've been looking at it for a lot of years, and I have a fairly decent sense of what's going on there.
And Sarah?
Yeah, I was just going to say what Kate just said, which is, you know, we've talked about putting together a Google sheet with questions about the budget anyway, like a sort of a running document. So we can add this, I can create it, we can put this at the top of the pile, and maybe there are enough questions to warrant a workshop, or maybe there's just a couple quick ones that that we can get answers to over the next couple of days or weeks. So happy to put that together.
Thank you, Sarah. That would be fantastic.
Yeah. And yeah, sure, depending on the level of the responses and the sense of the public interest in those things, we can come at it from a number of different ways, you know, create some FAQs or yeah, whatever seems like it suits the need the best.
Awesome. April, your hand is up. Did you have another question? Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I didn't skip over you. I promised I'd pay attention. Hey, this was great. Thank you so much for doing this. I think again, it gives a good baseline walking into the budget meetings over the next few days.
You are very welcome. How am I handing the baton back to you, do you think?
I think I have to go take it back. Pretty sure that's how that's going to work.
Take it away. There you go.
And I'm going to do this.
This is where you can kick me out too.
We'll see if I remember how to do that. I'm not sure I do. Oh man, hold on. Let's see what we got here. Yeah. Diane, help. I've got too many screens open. There we go.
I'm happy to help with those, Leanne.
Thank you. That would be great. Because yeah, I really do just have way too many screens going, and I'll get Andrew's presentation up. And when he's on, I will find a way to get this to him.
Leanne, I think Tristan said you can give your screen to somebody.
Yes. So as soon as we get Andrew in, I can turn this over to him.
Okay.
So I think I have promoted him to a panelist.
Okay. I know I had a delay with Kate when I was bringing her in. Oh, and we're gonna bring in Dana too.
There we go.
Okay. All right, Dana, I brought you.
I would just check with Kylie. Hi, Andrew.
Good evening.
I would check with if Kylie wants to also be promoted. I think those were the 3 members of the committee that are in the attendee.
I think she's already in.
Okay.
Okay. Now, let's see if I can do this right. So I want to remote control this to Andrew Bradley. All right, Mr. Bradley, I think you have my screen.
Let's see, can I actually use my screen?
No, I think you have to drive mine.
Okay. Well, I have embedded a bunch of animations here, which we'll just have to do without tonight.
Oh, no.
That's okay. So it's just to hide the bullets as they would appear so I could keep you focused. But hello, welcome. Great new stature and way of life in our virtual pandemic world. So I'm here tonight just to give a little recap on where the steering committee is. And there they are, the 3 points we're going to talk about. Just review where we've come to since the last readout, where we are right now, and some recommendations that we'd like the board to consider. See if I can hang on down here. And I am failing miserably here.
Leanne, would it be easier if you stop sharing your screen and Andrew shares his screen?
Probably. Let's try that. Okay, I did a stop share. At least I think I did. And I lost Zoom at the same time. There we go. Let's try this. Okay, I've stopped.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Andrew, I think you can take control.
Excellent. Okay. Salisbury's there. So just to sort of recap where we were in the last few months, what's been going on. We had our RFQ, which was our public advertisement requesting design firms give us qualifications for the KIDD 2 projects. That was the RFQ. 7 firms submitted, gave us official responses, and the building steering committee had a score sheet, which we all independently scored, and then we averaged those scores. And then from those results, we took our top 3 scoring firms and created a short list from those firms. We let the other firms know that they had not been selected. And so what that did is brought us to part 2, our short list in the interviews of those short list firms. A subset of the overall building steering committee was selected to do the face-to-face interviews with 7 members. And then what we did is we all individually scored the presenting firms, and then we averaged those firms out, the scores out, sorry. So we showed after that process is that we had sort of 1 firm that was definitely not selected, and then 2 that were in a near tie. Their scores were very close together, very tight. And so what we did is we just basically went ahead, told the 3rd place firm that they were not selected, thanking them very much for their time. And to the other 2 firms, what we did is we sent them a notification saying that we really had come to a point where our scoring process had come so close that we didn't feel like we could make the selection based on that score. And we asked them to sort of jump through another hoop for us. And what we did is ask them to provide us a document which lists the scopes of the services they will be providing both pre the referendum and then hopefully having a successful referendum, what they would do for us after the referendum. And then we also asked them to provide us fees for those 2 different phases of service. So that's basically where we are now. We've received those responses from those 2 firms, and basically now we're kind of in a holding pattern, waiting for some additional direction from the school board. So that's where we're looking to make some recommendations for the next steps. So what we'd like to do is have the board authorize or create a subcommittee that allows that subcommittee to negotiate with the 2 firms and make a final selection. We'd ask that as you're doing that, you provide the subcommittee with any sort of additional direction that we should use in that selection, other than just sort of the common standards of value to the town. And we expect this to follow a 4-part process once this committee would be established. So the first is to basically take those 2 responses from the firms and create sort of a reconciliation report. What we want to do is, obviously it's not a yes/no questionnaire that they've provided us with. We need to come up with a document that somehow sort of aligns the different topics provided, different efforts provided, and shows if there are any sort of gaps that have formed. Maybe one person is doing a lot more in the pre-referendum and another firm is doing a lot more in the post. We want to try and level that playing field a little bit for what's being done. And then the same with the costs. And then since, we want to kind of try and be fair, and both to the firms and to the town, we want to give those firms an opportunity to try and even out any of those gaps. We'll share that reconciliation with the firms and say, hey, so-and-so is doing this, can you do that also? And knowing that when you ask somebody to do something more, it costs more, or if you're asking them to do less, it costs less. So we'll give them a chance to also adjust whatever fee they've provided in that response. After that, we'll take those sort of re-reconciled documents and fees and scopes, and then just basically give the firms a heads up. Is this your best and final? Make sure that they didn't think of something after that, and say, what's your final comment? From there, basically we'd hope that the firm would be selected and based on the best value. And I want to say value because I don't really want to say cost. Cost is a big part of this, but I think there's, in this sort of situation where education is a fundamental part of what we do for our town, we want to bring some other sort of valuation commentary and thought process to it other than just financial. So we want to balance those things, get the most bang for our buck, would be one way to say it. From there, we would create a letter of intent or maybe a memorandum of understanding, which folds in the scope of services and the fee, and provide that to the board or the superintendent for a signature. And then that would be the end of that subcommittee. And we'd be off to the races. The one thing I did want to sort of highlight is, you may remember this slide from way back when. We've slid a little bit in terms of our timeline. You can see that the RFQ and the shortlist choice, that was supposed to be back in February. We're now just past April 1st. And we are into the time frame we were hoping to be doing having the firms perform their work, design firms. So one of the things that we'll have to consider as we're going forward is what impacts this will have on the quality of the work that can be done between now and when responses need to be brought back to the town. So that's my very quick, hopefully not too quick, summary of where the steering committee has gone and where we are right now. So sort of just going back up here, what we're really asking for is authorization or a creation from the school board of a new subcommittee with the authority to negotiate with firms. So that was fast. I'm sorry.
Nice job, Andrew.
Kylie, did I leave anything out there?
No, you answered everything really well. I know it was quick, but we do have time to answer questions. I know you guys have a very long schedule tonight, so we don't want to take up more of your time than needed.
I'll just say quickly, because most everybody knows already, but Alicia and I are on this committee. So thank you, Andrew, and Dana and Kylie for joining us. I think that one of the benefits of having we talked about this a lot in our committee meeting, but we did have such a close score, and we talked about how what we could do about it. And we came up with this kind of plan of asking these two firms for their scope of work, and that we would be able to compare and contrast that, and along with the cost. And I actually think it's going to turn out to be an advantage for us, not only for cost, but in terms of having a really clear understanding of what the scope is and what we care about the most for being in that scope of work, because we're going to be able to compare two different ideas from two different firms.
Yeah, I think it really provides you hope every RFP goes this way, where you have some really capable firms come to the table. We had some amazingly talented firms come to the table, and we ended up with some firms that really brought their game. I think this is a nice position to be in, to have so many capable firms at the table, willing and able to do the work, and any of them will provide excellent quality work to the town of Scarborough. So we're pretty excited about it.
April, your hand is up.
Procedurally speaking, would this come back to the board again for final approval before we would enter into a contract, or is this a request to vet these two companies, and then ultimately the building steering committee will make that choice, and you will have already been given the authority to enter into a contract?
I think, just slight difference of words. I think the steering committee is would be separate from this. I think we'd like to have some members of the steering committee on this selection committee, this negotiation committee. But I think we'd also like to have board members in that committee as well to be part of that negotiation, and so that we can sort of fast track this process. I think this four-step process outlined here, I think we could get it done in 2, maybe 3 weeks tops. This is maybe the good part of a lot of things getting shut down, is we can focus our attentions. And sort of alluded to with that timeline, I'd like to try and get some time back. So I understand what you're saying. I can sense some hesitation about having a subcommittee deliver the response to the board, but I think if we can get some critical board members into that group, as well as a few of the steering committee people in that group, I would be open to it being people outside those two groups if you'd like. But I think time-wise, we'd like to see that one committee authorized to select one of the two. As Dana mentioned, both these firms are wonderful. I think we don't really have a problem selecting either one of the two. I think it's just really about smoothing out the scopes and the fees, and then getting authorization to let one of these firms move forward.
I'm trying to figure out how to word my question a little differently for you, or maybe it's for Leanne. So tonight I guess I'm having a hard time, Leanne, with the procedure part. So I feel like tonight we're not, what I expected was for the school board to approve or to vote in favor of the building steering committee or Sandy entering into negotiations with a specific firm. But since we have competing firms and they're going to take a slightly different process, I guess my wonder now is once they've narrowed it down to one, whether it's a subcommittee or the full committee, Andrew, like that's in the weeds, you know? Once you've narrowed it down to one, is it going to come back to the board for final approval, or are we basically giving that approval now for something that's going to happen a few weeks from now? Does that make more sense?
Yeah, I think what we're asking for is approval to move forward with one of these two and give that committee the ability to choose which of the two it is.
All right, I'm going to ask a question kind of banked on that one, April, because I think I'm a little confused now as well. So that would basically be saying that we would be saying, go ahead, start negotiations and start the process financially with one of these firms?
Yes. That's right.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for answering that. Does that clarify the question for you, April?
Can I just, is the stumbling point here that you want a final approval before a contract is signed? You're muted. You're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry. No, the stumbling point for me, I guess, is the elephant in the room, maybe, that whether or not this is the right time to enter into a negotiation with a architecture firm to build a school with there's so much uncertainty. And I understand the balance between continuing life and moving things forward, and then also being really well aware of the fact that this entire pandemic is changing people's lives. So I guess I just want to be very clear before I vote tonight, whether I'm voting to approve the formation of a subcommittee or whether I'm voting to approve that subcommittee enter into a contract.
I guess I'd make comment on two. To the first part, we've had a lot of discussions. You know, my background professionally is with an AE design firm, as well as Kylie, and Dana has a lot of, both I think both feet firmly in the world of construction for IDEX. What's happening right now is, I hate to say this out loud, but it's a unique opportunity for the town. A lot of construction projects are going on hold. A lot of firms are in a difficult position. And I think it gives us a lot of negotiating power at the moment. And also there's the ability that if we are going to be entering into recession nationwide, to be sort of first at the trough for a bunch of construction companies who are going to be hungry for work. There's going to be a surge in demand after this, and I hate to be on the tail end of that. And I guess, so there's an opportunistic factor to my commentary here. I feel like the town's dollars can be best spent during a recession when they can buy more bang for that buck. Each beam or column or footing or desk will cost less during a recession than otherwise. So that's one part. And then the simple answer to the other question about the vote, I'll let Leanne answer it better than me, but I think the answer to your question was yes. We're asking for you to vote on a committee with who has the authority to choose.
Yeah, I think if there's concern around entering into an agreement, and these agreements, I'll just say they're not agreements that, you know, say, well, you have to do the whole thing.
Right.
You know, it's a portion, you know, it's as the work progresses, you know, the fee is dispersed up into a certain point. But if there's concern around having an approval or being able to review something before it gets signed, we could consider, once we get to the end of the process and we have you know, a firm selected and contractual you know, terms and conditions ironed out, we could consider doing some sort of a special session to have a review if that's needed. I think the concern at this point is more around the schedule and making sure that we keep things moving, so that we don't burn the time between, you know, when we finalize an agreement and when the next meeting would be. We want those two things to meet.
Right. So maybe the way to word that is, April, I think we can meet that by, yes, there's this authorization to create a committee and have them negotiate on behalf and to enter into an agreement. And then there is where maybe we come back to receive authorization to proceed with the work. That would.
Nick?
I'm over here kind of trying to hear what everyone's saying and then kind of editing my words as I hear it. And so I think I'm stuck between this place of the need for this school has not changed. However, the face of education is changing every day. The principal reason we need this building, and still need it, is space. And also, you know, the buildings we have are older. And so that hasn't changed. What I'm struggling with is that the face of education is changing every single day. Distance education is taking a role that it's never taken before out of necessity, not just opportunity. And actually, Sandy shared with us some data earlier via email showing just how much the use of our tools has gone up. There's no going back from this. We will go back much of the way, but education will be, in my opinion, will be forever changed. And so as we think about what brought us into this process of the school and what's going on every day with this evolving pandemic, I'm just concerned about kind of pressing forward. I also understand the opportunity piece, because in the community college system, we talk about the opportunity. There are more people on unemployment. There are more people who have filed for unemployment in Maine as of today than ever before. And there have been discussions about that being an opportunity for our state's community colleges and universities. But we also have to realize that we're going to be asking our townspeople to vote in favor of spending a lot of money when more people are out of work now than ever before. And I'm struggling with that a bit. And I'm glad you put the timeline up there, Andrew, because I'm going to be really honest here. I don't see us hitting November. I think that's very challenging right now. And so the fact that we're a little behind on the timeline doesn't concern me as much, but I agree with what April said to kind of bring my rant to a close. Because this is changing so fast, I think I would be in favor of forming a committee that's going to get us down to finally, here's the committee, here's the firm we think is the best, here's the amount that they think they can do it for, and then bring it to the board again for that final stamp before we start spending dollars, because we have no idea what things are going to look like in a week or a month. And I'm really worried about giving a committee that authority today, having no idea what these next few weeks are going to mean for our community and certainly for education. So,
Hillary? Oh, sorry, Nick, were you done? I'm so
done.
sorry. Okay.
I'm trying to put my hand down.
All right, Hillary?
Oh, am I unmuted? No. So I had one thing I wanted to say, and it was actually about the timeline. So I know I've said this before, that our timeline has never been set in stone, and that's never been more true than it is. today, because, you know, as Andrew noted, we are behind on the timeline for November. And in addition, there's a lot of things going on that were unexpected. And all the firms we talked to, and certainly the two firms that we're talking about today, all know that. They knew that our timeline was fluid and that November was like a target, but not necessarily the end all be all. So I think that I just wanted to say that because the visual of the timeline shows November 2020 as being the end date, and we are behind for that. But I don't think that I guess I just wanted to put that out there, that timeline was never set in stone, and that I don't think people think it's even more unrealistic than it may have been on a rush timeline from before. So
regardless,
number two is I just want to say I couldn't disagree with you more strenuously, Nick, about the distance learning. And I think the faster that we can get our kids back into the buildings to be taught in person by our teachers is what's best for them. I think that it has definitely highlighted a lot of the options that we have available, and people are using them more. And I think especially at the middle school and the high school level, that hopefully they'll continue to use those, not in place of traditional learning, but to coincide with it. But it's brought, in my opinion, it's shown a really bright light on how inadequate it is for our younger students. And I think that they're really suffering. So I don't think that it's a replacement in any way, shape, or form for, and I know you're not saying that it's not a replacement for I know that's not what you're saying. I just want to say that I understand your point, and I think that it is valid for like maybe 6 through 12, but you know, the little kids that we have, and even the Wentworth kids, they're not getting very much from distance learning and from the computer programs that we're offering. And that just is what it is. So I didn't want to let that pass.
April?
My question is back to the commitment and what entering into a negotiation would mean. I have some budget questions. I don't know if now is the time to ask those or not, in terms of where, if we have money budgeted to enter into some kind of contract now, or what those upfront costs would be. I literally know, nothing about how this whole process works. So
wait, I'm just going to interrupt really quickly because I think that's a question for Sandy, but also Andrew and Dana and Kylie can probably give us a quick rundown on how most firms structure their fees. Could you do that before Sandy answers?
Yeah, sure. So the way we perceive this, and actually the way we ask the firms to respond, is they would do the pre-referendum work as a fixed fee. So we would know going into up to referendum what they're going to charge us to do the work to get to referendum. After the referendum, hopefully it's successful and it passes. The traditional way to do work for a construction project of this size is as a percentage of the construction cost. So, if it's a $100 million building, the math is easy. So 6% on $100 million is $6 million. So if it were 99, it's less than 6. If it's 50 million, it's 3. So what that does is it sort of protects the town, because we get to control the fee in a way about what we want, but it also protects the firm because it protects them from having to do a lot more work than they signed on for. So it's sort of a fair accommodation to align what we're asking for and what they're giving us. I'm not sure that satisfied you, April, because your body language doesn't look like it's satisfied.
Well, so I guess so then my other question is, do we have money in the budget this year to move forward with this? And do we have, so maybe I'm misunderstanding the pre-referendum fee after they've calculated a total would be what we would owe soon.
Correct. We would select somebody, and that's the fee. Part of the fee we'd be negotiating, and say it's $350,000. So $350,000 would be all the work they would do to get us through referendum, which would include sort of conceptual design work and plans, probably help us get through some site selection work, interviewing the teachers and the users, going through the existing schools. There's a lot of legwork as well as a lot of design work. So that fee would cover their costs. And to be quite frank, it's probably not really their costs. It's just enough to salve the wound of doing the work in hopes that the greater project goes forward. And then it would convert to a percentage. And both of those things would be negotiated now.
So we're still looking at a couple $100,000
Yes, ma'am.
soon. Okay. Do we have that, Sandy?
And
Or
Sarah may
Kate
have-
or whoever?
Yeah.
I don't think Kate's in anymore, but I am texting with her, and the answer is no for this budget. So. So I think, I guess, I don't want to speak out of turn because I see other people have their hands raised, but I guess I agree with the approach that I think we need to take this in 2 steps in terms of approval and get a better sense of what we were talking about. If it was a couple $1,000s, we could cover it in this year's budget, but that price tag we can't.
Thanks, Sarah. Alicia? You're on mute, by the way.
I thought I found a shortcut to do that, but I guess I didn't. So usually we would have these contract discussions about costs in an executive session. And so I think part of my question is answered because it sounds like the process that people are leaning towards the fact that the process should be bifurcated. I'm just wondering if there is a way that we can have an executive type of session with members from the committee, or if Sandy could report that back to us, because it's really hard to be talking about negotiations, not have a number, not have a firm picked, and also not want to completely have those discussions that probably should be held in private. And so I'm just wondering procedurally if there's a way that can occur.
There is, and it was actually something that learned about this week in a workshop. We can host it's a Zoom meeting. It would be a non-public Zoom meeting, but we could do an executive session that way and have this conversation. And I agree with you. I think we need to have this in 2 parts to work through this, especially where, we're treading into some areas that are maybe more confidential. To that end, I'm a little confused on where the next right thing to do is. Oh, Hillary, I'll let you pop in before I finish my thought. Go.
Yeah, I raised my hand, everyone. I think if people are leaning towards splitting this up, which I think is fine, then I guess tonight we would be so I guess then the line of demarcation would be that the committee would be formed, the committee would negotiate, and the committee would basically come up with a contract that they would then present to the board in executive session to be reviewed, and Kate, probably have Kate there, and then that would be the time at which we would decide whether to sign the contract or to press pause or whatever.
So I don't have a raise hand button, so I'll raise my hand. with regard to the contract negotiation, I think at this point our bigger question is around budget. I think we need to have collectively a conversation around schedule and budget. That needs to be sort of our first step before we do anything else. That's the highest priority for this project.
Agreed. I think it would be unfair for us to enter in negotiations with a firm without knowing what we could pay them.
Absolutely not. Yeah, we need to be honest and forthright with them about what's going on. And so I think, at least Andrew and I as a chair and vice chair and Kylie, we kind of need to understand, what the process is from here so that we can engage faithfully with those firms.
Just to ask the $1 million question then, does it make sense for us to table the discussion under the new business side and put forward a executive session for our next meeting to have this conversation and then continue from there, from your opinion?
Yes.
Yeah, and I might even suggest, I don't know when the next meeting is, but we would want to do that relatively quickly. A month would not be.
Our next meeting is scheduled for the 16th.
What are your thoughts, Andrew? Is that?
I would suggest, we don't have to have an executive session before a meeting though, do we? I mean, can't we just schedule an executive session if the 16th is not soon enough?
Ideally, it would be good to have this conversation next week. These firms have been waiting a while now, and there's a lot hanging in the balance for a lot of these firms, and they might want to take on other work, and I don't want to hold them up. They've engaged in our projects, put a lot of effort into it, so I want to make sure that we're.
I agree, and I think that if we could meet next week, we could inform the process ahead of the meeting for the 16th. It would get enough time for us to raise questions, answer them, come back and forth, and by the 16th, in a position where we can answer this question in front of us about where to go with negotiations without having to add another 2 weeks for negotiations.
Yep.
All right, what I can do is I can work with Sandy and Diane on scheduling another date. I know that we have a special meeting next week for the first reading of the budget. Maybe we can tag the two of them together. I want to just confirm that that's all okay to do without saying we're doing it. So let me check and I can circle back on that.
Okay.
Thank you again. Thank you guys so much for this. This was incredibly informative as always when you come and tell us what's been going on. Oh, Alicia, I'm sorry. You're on mute again.
Thank you. I didn't want to interrupt you because I wanted to sort of thank them as well. I mean, the amount of time that they have put in to this project is ridiculous, and the expertise that they bring, we're just so lucky to have. And I can't imagine how frustrating it must be to get to this point and to hear some of these barriers. And so I just want to thank you for continuing and persevering, and I know how difficult and frustrating this must be, and we're all trying to do what's best, and sort of these changes circumstances are difficult, but thank you for handling them so well.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, everyone on the board, I think I can say this easily, that we're all vested. We want to see the best thing for the town. So this is not the best results we wanted, but fully understand, and we're all in to make this positive solution.
Yeah, our goal is an ideal outcome for the students and the town as well. So yeah, we're there. We're in it for in it to win it.
Right. And I think one of the things that is a little bit of a relief is that we're not trying to barrel towards November. So we have not a huge amount, but we do have a small window to kind of gauge our response and know what we're prepared for budget wise.
Yes.
Yeah, really appreciate it. And I will have an answer to you tomorrow about when the meeting will be.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for dropping in.
Thank you, guys.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank you.
good meeting. Stay safe.
Good night.
All right, Monique, you're on mute at the moment, but you've been promoted as a panelist. And given how unwell it has worked with trying to share my laptop, if you wanted to bring up the presentation and take control, that would probably be the easiest thing if you happen to have that on your desktop.
Let me see if I can make that work. How is that?
Perfect.
Is that working all right?
Looks great.
Great. I think I'm going to let Sandy introduce this portion of the agenda to provide us with a bit of context around where we are and what we've been through to get to this point in time. Sandy?
Thank you. First and foremost, I just want to thank Monique for being a strong leader with this work. As you know, it is about teaching and learning and what's going on to continue the learning. And I applaud Monique and my whole team for the work that they've done. Secondly, I just want to remind everybody that for many, many years, hundreds of years, students have always gone to a building to go to school. And all of a sudden, that stopped in this country, USA, and now we're doing remote learning. And we had very little time to plan for that. And we've learned a lot going through this. And we know there's going to be bumps and hiccups, but I have to say it's been collaborative and it's been good work. And I know for a fact that people are working incredibly hard. Our teachers were put in a tough position, but they've made the best of it. And our students will continue to make some gains. And I'm just so proud of this district and the work that they've done. And I just want to reinforce that it's not perfect, but we'll get to a place where we will feel much more comfortable about this work. And again, to turn this around in a week's time is just phenomenal. So I just wanted to kind of remind people of that. And certainly we welcome anybody's input to help add value to this work. We are one community and we necessarily will rely on input from others to help us have a better understanding of any bumps or hurdles that people are dealing with. So I just wanted to frame it like that, and I'll turn it back over to Monique.
Thank you so much, Sandy. Yes, this has been, I'm going to move along. Why are we bringing forward a plan tonight? As folks may or may not know, that the Department of Education has made this a requirement to develop a plan to continue the learning and have that approved by local boards and submit that and share that with the DOE. Our goals as we set forward, feels like years ago now, but just a few weeks ago to begin this plan, was first to reduce that spread of infectious disease throughout the system and promote that social distancing. Also to provide continuity for instruction as best we can for all students. And thirdly, to ensure the continued health and well-being of all of our students, including food security. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I go over pieces of this plan. It is not business as usual. This is a fluid plan. As I was looking back over the details of the plan in preparation for today, we've accomplished a number of the pieces that were in here as challenges, and I'll speak to those. We are following that data-wise process, that habit of mind called ACE. A for the ACE is act, assess, and adjust, and that's what we are doing on a daily basis, almost hourly as well. It's also, the C is intentional collaboration, and we're learning how to collaborate in this new environment. It is taking a lot longer, and we don't have a whole lot of time. For you folks, as I've watched you folks learn about this video conferencing, you had a workshop to learn how to do this, and we're all learning in this environment. And then the E in our ACE habit of mind is really about making our decisions grounded in evidence, and I'll provide you with some data tonight as well. We tried to plan on working remotely. It's been a challenge because it's not just the learning plan piece, but it's also our central offices, our school offices, it's our support staff, it's our business office. It doesn't just happen overnight, and everyone is scurrying around their own homes to try and find and make office space. But within this plan, health within the community is paramount, and we all have to do our part and follow those CDC recommendations. So our mantra, as we dive into lots of discussions and have debates, is really, what are we really about here during this time, this temporary time, and that is to stay connected as a learning community and do our part to keep the learning going for our students. So part of this plan was redefining employee expectations because they were no longer on site. Certainly, if staff become ill, they are to report to a supervisor so that we can figure out who's going to back them up. So in general, for teachers and professional staff, we want them to schedule their workday as much as possible, following the general expectations as they outline those as they're outlined in their contracts. So we want them to check their email twice a day, as that is the mode of communication, the main mode of communication these days. But we also want them to provide instructional support, oversight, and feedback to students. We want them to be communicating with parents and guardians, but they're also involved in team meetings, IEPs, 504, and they're also engaged in their own professional development, whether they wanted to be or not in this situation. We're all learners again. And that is all directed by building leadership. So some of those other professional staff would include librarians, counselors, social workers, nurses, etc. Our educational technician and others who are on hourly contracts, we're asking them to perform their duties defined by their either cooperating teacher or supervisor. So they may be involved in copying packets, communicating with students to support them. Our buses are delivering packets to homes. Custodians come in and are still on call. If some of those areas of the school that are still being used, they come in and they will be cleaning once a week. Our nutrition staff is still on because they're still providing backpacks and food and preparing meals for our students as well. So in the development of this plan, we gathered input from district leadership, building leaders, teacher leaders, Scarborough Education Association. We've been meeting regularly with the association, and other staff as well has helped us in informing this. We're also connected to our regional educational colleagues, and so we've added information within this plan as a result of those collaborations. But we want you to know that the plan is evolving. Flexibility is our starting point. We're problem solving, but we're trying to stay solution focused. We're trying to gather that input from the community to adjust as we move along. But there are some decision-making givens that we all agreed to up front. First is making our decisions in the best interest of all students, which has been our mantra all along, whether we were in the facilities or in this remote environment now. We're striving to keep our students engaged, challenged, and learning, but we also recognize that every family situation is different. And some of our students are helping out with childcare. Some of our students are helping out and providing community service as well. We also want to acknowledge that during these times, those situations are going to evolve and change also. Family members may become ill, students may become ill. So we want to make sure that what we put in place, quite frankly, does no harm to our students. We early on decided we needed a central location for all of our communications. And so thankfully we have a great IT staff, and they built a number of sites for us off of our school's main page. And so those weekly learning plans that I'll talk about in just a minute can be accessed via the Scarborough website on this link. And I think this presentation will be placed in PDF and placed on the website as well. So across all the schools, our first priority really when we got going was really to connect with students and families. And that could be by email, phone, Google Classroom Meets, etc. And we're still working on that. We're still working on connecting with all students. Building principals have been working on making sure that our students, we know where they are, they're safe. And as teachers begin reaching out to students, that they create that sense of belonging and caring, because our students are stressed. It's a stressful environment right now with lots of unknowns. Our students are feeling that, and stressed students don't learn. We want to support the learning, so we want to make sure that we're checking in with our students first. School nutrition and support. We want to offer and continue to offer supports for food insecurity. Whether or not you are a backpack receiver, if you are suddenly finding yourselves or families are finding themselves in an insecure spot with a lot of unknowns and struggling with food security, please reach out to via either email or by phone. Someone is manning that phone so that we can get you supports. Also, we wanted to provide opportunities for learning that leverage both online and offline, and particularly low resource learning activities. Early on, our instructional coaches worked with building principals to quickly get out that first week of instructional plans. But also early on, we realized our K-5 students went home without laptops. So we scurried to the IT staff, basically 3 or 4 folks, went through all our elementary K2 schools and pulled out all those Chromebooks, cleaned them, got them ready for distribution, and we had 2 sessions where we distributed about 1,285 Chromebooks. We're also in the process of assessing students' internet access, and we're pretty close. We have a number of different ways in which we get that information. But if families are struggling with and need tech support, that email we've expanded the people who are responding to that email. That email is the best way to get in touch. We were flooded with calls early on, but this week they've been about 10 or so emails a day. So that has leveled off. So here's a little bit of data for you. Other resources we wanted to leverage was K8. We have the iReady. It was a universal screener we started this year. All our students in the fall and the winter took a diagnostic, a universal screener in math and in reading. So we had a good start. We are also piloting online instruction, which is an evidence-based program, which if students work between about 15 minutes a day, about 45 minutes a week per content area, the data shows that there is increased learning. So the evidence is pretty strong there. Last week's percentage of students who completed online lessons for reading was 93%. And these are K-8 students. There are some students at the high school who are also on these online lessons. The lessons really go only up to grade 8. So that's why this is K-8 data. And in math, 95% of our students actually completed online lessons. So teachers can monitor that. If students get stuck, they can assign lessons. That's been valuable. In this chart over on the right, if you note that on March 16th, you'll notice that in terms of our email, we put out about 400, 500 staff persons, and at the high school, students have email, 2,000 emails. And if we're looking at April 2nd, 10,768 emails were sent. On the receiving end, March 16th, the first day of our distance learning being away, there were 17,000 emails came into our system. And then April 2nd, 53,000. For Google Classroom, I won't go through all of those pieces, but we are leveraging Google Classroom both at the middle school and the high school. And so we've seen an increase. There were about 560 active classes. And then just recently on April 2nd, there were 800 active classes. Google Meet is the video conferencing solution that we are promoting, and we're promoting it because it's a much safer alternative than what is now popular, Zoom. There are a number of free resources being offered out there, and we are very careful and cautious about online applications. We run them through a student data privacy set of standards to make sure that they are safe for our students. And that's why we have Google Meet. We can also monitor Google Meet as well. So you'll notice March 16th, there were only 3 Google Meets. April 2nd, today there were 1,835 Google Meets in action. Chromebooks connected, our connectivity. March 16th, there were 35 active and connected externally. And just today, there were 2,351 devices connected. So we are leveraging those resources, but we don't want to assume all students have access as well. So in terms of specifics, K-8, the decision was made early on by our building leaders to have weekly plans. The purpose around this is to provide flexibility, but also take the responsibility off of individual classroom teachers where they couldn't get together to collaborate very easily. We would have teams of teachers working together remotely to put together weekly plans. So the role of the teacher would be to support the learning, respond to questions that students or families might have, and if students need enrichment, provide additional activities. If students need support, provide additional supports and activities for students. We purposefully wanted to make sure there were online and offline activities. We're asking that families do and students do what they can. Now, early on, when we thought maybe this would be a 2 or 3 week span of time, we wanted to provide an awful lot of flexibility. But now that it is looking like it is longer, we are expecting that students engage in their coursework. But we also recognize that every family situation is different, and we want to be flexible and try to accommodate folks as best we can. These weekly plans are developed. There are meetings scheduled and remote meetings scheduled, and the instructional coaches along with teams of teachers work with the building principal to put them together. They're posted on Friday afternoons. I post them on the website and make them available. I review them. Actually, I was reviewing them this afternoon, reviewing them from the middle school in the afternoon. The principals take feedback from parents and students to adjust their plans every week. So it's evolving. But we want our community to know that they don't have to feel like they have to do them one week. If a student is ill or can't engage with their work, that's fine. Be helpful to call the school number and let us know that. And that's why we archive the previous plans, and we want students to do the work that they can do. We also print packets for those in need. We're working on a system, a safe system for our employees, but also an efficient system for delivering packets of paper to students. At the high school, the learning plans look a little different. It did not make sense to have weekly plans for the entire high school because students are involved in a variety of different courses at a variety of different levels. And so Sue Ketch and I worked on how about doing some weekly informational updates to focus on the important information. And so she's crafting those communications every week. She's meeting with her team leaders, her department heads, who are the team leaders at the high school. They're working within their departments to respond to questions and help support staff in developing and adjusting their coursework and their expectations to meet those targeted timelines. So the learning plans, we decided on these as a leadership council, this in terms of amount of time per day, because we recognize that our students may be involved in helping out around the house, which is great, we promote that. as well as caring for siblings or relatives during this time. So we're targeting these times. It doesn't mean students can't go beyond, but we also want to make sure that our students remain healthy, and we certainly don't want to overburden them with too much work. We do have challenges with this learning plan. Again, it is fluid and changing, ever changing. So the planning is updated weekly. We work together to problem solve every week. Our leadership councils, meetings, that's what we do. Learning is different now. The redesign is ongoing. We recognize it's not a replacement for in-class learning. All students really need to engage with and have concrete experiences, hands-on labs, projects, etc. And I would advocate that that's a K-12 need, just not an elementary need. We have students at the high school who engage in scientific labs and experiments. We have a STEM lab, robotics. There's a lot of equipment, specialized equipment there. We have students taking art courses. The ceramics teacher was wondering, how am I going to do this? There are performances, a band, music, chorus. And so we're unable to ensure equity of access to materials and experiences. We're doing the best we can, but we've got to recognize that it is different. And we are limited, there are constraints. And so with this timeline looking like it's moving more and more out, we need to also readjust and prioritize the curriculum content. That's a lot of work, usually done collaboratively. We're going to try to keep that going, but again, we want our teachers' time to be working with students and supporting students. The other place in which we're challenged is providing individual support to students. That amount of time has decreased, and students who need individual support usually need more, and they usually need different. And this online environment poses some constraints that are a challenge to us, but we're continually putting our creative energies to use and looking out there to see what kinds of ideas might be out there to help support our students. Assessment is looking different, as well as reporting, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So we're looking at changing how we do business. It's not just the content, but it's the strategies and methodologies. So we're all in this mode of instantly needing to be a learner, but also being asked to conduct the teaching and learning through their homes as well. So things are taking longer is what we're finding. It's a great source of frustration to me because we have limited modes of communication. I could get a whole lot done if I brought a group of teachers together. They could bring all their stuff together and we could share and work together to come up with either a decision or a plan or a task. This scheduling time, composing your thoughts in email, waiting for someone to respond, you've got text coming in, it's limited. And so it's been difficult to keep things moving along quickly. One thing we want the community to understand is that everyone in our organization, about 500 people, are learning to work from home. They are opening their doors to, when they run a Google Meet or a video conference, their home now is part of their classroom. And so we're trying to reinvent that. But we need folks to understand that when we were at school, we had control over our bandwidth and we had sufficient bandwidth. Every faculty member's home bandwidth may different if it's even available. We also need to recognize that staff don't yet have access, we're trying to problem solve this, to a work phone line. Many of our staff only have their personal cell phone. And some of our staff are using their personal cell phones. Some of our staff are a little hesitant to do so. Our staff really want to do what's in the best interest of students. They're concerned about video conferencing. How do they know who else is in the room? How do they know who is maybe recording them? So we're working through those issues and educating our staff, but also, if you recall, in the days before email, when email first came out, we had to sort of fumble through it and develop a new etiquette for doing email. It's the same thing with video conferencing. So, and our staff are struggling with the same challenges, personal challenges everyone is struggling with: stress, childcare, illness, same kinds of things on top of everything. So we want everyone to stay healthy, and we are taking the stance that everyone is needing to be healthy and stay healthy. We also have staff who have a range of expertise with a variety of online tools, and our technology coaches have been instrumental at bringing people up to speed as quickly as possible in this remote environment. I had to ask them to pull back a bit because they were spending 10, 12 hours responding to emails and running virtual office hours in their efforts to get everybody up and running and going. But that they still could be working those hours, but I've asked them to, you know, we need them as a resource and to take care of themselves. The other thing we're working on is developing backup plans. Some of our staff may well become ill over time and may not be able to fulfill their work duties. And so we need to problem solve how we're going to manage that. In terms of grading and reporting.
Monique?
Yes?
Before we get into the grading and reporting, could we take a real quick break to allow for questions based on the plan specifically from the board members?
Sure.
And I'm going to assume that there will be questions.
I just have to figure out how to raise my hand. I lost it.
Alicia, you are on, oh, there, you've unmuted. Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you, Monique, for all of the hard work you've put into getting this up and running. I can't imagine what an undertaking it has been. And I've heard a lot of positive feedback, so I really appreciate that. The document that we received for the distance learning plan talked about the asynchronous learning, and that's some of the biggest feedback that I've been getting from parents is their preference, and you know, I've heard different preferences. So could you describe what asynchronous learning is and why the recommendation has been made to focus on asynchronous learning at this time?
Sure. Synchronous learning comes with some challenges, and bandwidth is one of those. Whether or not a teacher who may be running a Google Meet and having all of those students on at the same time, the bandwidth from their home internet may not support all of that. And so what we're encouraging staff to do is to do some recordings or schedule time and work with smaller groups of students at one time. Asynchronous learning is when the learning happens at a different time, not in real time with the teacher. And so examples of asynchronous learning, middle school is using Google Classroom. So the teacher will post an assignment or ask students to watch a video or to, just trying to remember some of the activities from the weekly learning plans, or to engage with an activity within one of their materials. And students can do that on any day of the week that they choose. They don't all have to do it at once, and then they can submit their work to the teacher. The teacher can provide feedback on the Google Classroom. It doesn't mean that it all has to happen in real time at the same time. Likewise, offline activities can be asynchronous. Those packets that go home to students may choose to work on those on Monday or Tuesday or a combination of those times. And we're working on a system to have that work come back We're looking at the possibility of having our office staff bring those packets back and possibly scan to email and then email those to teachers. That will really bump up the 53,000 emails, but scan those to teachers so they won't have to be handling those, that paper, and it would be more efficient just in terms of delivery.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hillary? And you're on mute.
So I had a couple questions about, so I had a specific question about the email. We're asking teachers to check their email twice a day. That seems really low to me. And I don't know, how did you come up with that? I mean, I check my email 7 times a day and I don't work full time.
Right. And, you know, it's a starting point for us. In this plan, and that decision was made early on. And then also in consultation with the SEA, other staff leadership, it's a minimum expectation. And the other part of that is staff are involved in planning and communicating with students. It can be either email, or they could be running virtual office hours, or they could be planning work or composing activities. So one of the challenges is to set those expectations across K-12, where an elementary teacher might have 20 students, and a high school teacher may have 80 students or 90 students. And so it was challenging, and it was our first, we did that in the first week. We may look to shift that based on feedback.
Okay. And I guess I have another question is, it seems like, I think this is a question that other board members had too. As I was looking through, it gave some pretty specific hours for leadership and central office staff, but not for teachers or ed techs. Have you revisited that at all?
I think it was just an oversight that didn't make it into the plan, but teachers a day, hours for the day is articulated within their contract. So when we talk about their general, it's articulated in their individual contracts, what their time commitment is.
Okay, so I guess that's just not clear in the plan. So is there any flexibility with, I mean, I'm on negotiation, so I know that the contract has some specific, although actually, does it just say 7 hours?
I believe that's what it.
Okay, so it's not, okay. And then when do you expect, like I can only use myself as an example. I have 3 kids at 3 different levels of learning, and there's a lot of, and a very impressive amount of communication at the middle school and the high school. When do you expect K2 teachers to start communicating with their students and families?
We're working on setting those expectations up. Some teachers have just been busy learning the tools, the online tools and pieces. Teachers are also getting flooded with information as well. So staff, building leaders are working together. K2 is challenging because what K2 is trying to do is come together 3 schools and operate as one K2 school remotely. So that has slowed things down there in terms of setting expectations and following through on some pieces. But they've spent quite a bit of time in coordinating their efforts. So it's not just one principal making a decision and meeting with a lead teacher, it's 3 buildings coming together to do that process. So that has been a challenge for them, but I've been very impressed with how quickly, I mean, they've been staying on the same schedule as the larger buildings. So certainly are revisiting all of these pieces, and communication expectations is one that we're certainly revisit.
Okay, that would be, I think, good. I don't know. I've talked to some people, and surprisingly, I have these 3 different kids at 3 different levels, and I would have thought that it would be most challenging for my older kids. And in fact, what I've seen is that they're pretty able to handle it, and my younger 2nd grader is just losing it. So I think that expectation of a certain amount of communication from those K2 teachers, it would be really important to get up and running.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Alicia?
Thank you. So I do know that you're trying to make contact with all students, and I know that teachers are sort of determining who's participating, but how is that being reported in terms of, so once you make an initial contact, for those teachers that are not engaging in synchronous learning, how are we determining that those kids are okay, that they're doing the socially, emotionally, that their things are all right at home, that they are accessing their education? And so I understand that obviously first it's at the teacher level, but how is that being reported?
That's something that we are having ongoing conversations about. We just started at the last Leadership Council meeting, a process district-wide where teachers are to, if they have not heard from a student within a certain amount of time, they are to they are to record when, how many attempts and through what vehicle they tried to get in touch with either the student or the parent, and then they are to contact either the building principal at K2 or guidance as well, and then the building principal, between the building principal and guidance, will problem solve how to make those contacts. And there was one child that we were unable to do that and went through the whole system, and we asked the Scarborough Police Department to do a wellness check because we just hadn't heard from the child or the family. But in terms of recording the information and keeping anecdotal notes on students, that's something we're going to ask teachers to do, because we also have response to intervention student support systems in place when we were in the school. Now we're looking to build those remotely, scheduling time each week for teams to come together, a conversation to be had if a teacher brings a student forward, if they're worried about them, either their social emotional health, what's going on in the family, or if it's academic. And then the group will problem solve and develop a plan to help support that student. So our same support systems, we're just retooling them in this new environment.
Thank you.
Hillary?
This is just kind of a quick question, but I noticed that in the plan you have asked teachers and staff if they're sick or going to be absent, that they still use ASAP. What's the procedure for letting the parents and kids of those students know? Just because if you're expecting to hear back from your teacher and they have a planned absence or they're sick, it would be good for them to know that.
Absolutely. In addition to routing phones and reorganizing offices and things, we've also asked teachers to contact their building principal to let them know. And similar to when we're in session, the building principal makes arrangements. We certainly aren't hiring subs, but we can certainly let parents and family know. We would like the teacher, I shared a little protocol and a little email that teachers can send to their families, letting them know they're unavailable for instruction on a particular day. And if the teacher is unable to do that, they're to let the principal know so that the principal can communicate that out to their families.
Okay. And my second question was, could you describe a little bit about how special education students' needs are being met individually with ed? I mean, I know a little bit, like I know ed techs are kind of being assigned and special ed teachers are having meetings with parents, but could you go into that a little bit?
Sure. For students who have individualized plans, we special ed staff have worked to identify activities, resources, accommodations, materials. Some students are able to access certain online programs and are doing so. Other students may need different materials, resources, and that's where delivering those packets of information and strategies is. It's far from perfect. We wish we could do more in this environment, but because of social distancing, it's quite a challenge.
I've also invited Allison to join the conversation if she has anything to add on that.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So actually, we've developed individualized remote learning plans for all 430 of our special education students. They have been developed by their special education teams during the last 2 weeks and will start being electronically sent out to families beginning tomorrow. There are a variety of ways that we're connecting with students. I've asked that special education teachers have at least 2 to 3 contacts per week with their students. So that could include anything from a Google Meets morning meeting to a small instructional in reading or math, to posting online videos, to accessing RazKids, iReady, IXL Math, a variety of online math academic programs that can track their access. There's also phone calls, emails. Some students are doing rating scales, entry and exit slips every day. They're doing their writing by Google Documents, so they're getting daily feedback on that. So lots of different ways. We have ed techs assigned to each special education student so that all students can have that individual contact in a variety of ways, a variety of times every week, in addition to all of their related service providers. Speech OT, social work, PT are all part of the remote learning plans. So I'm exceptionally proud of the kids and the families and the staff and how they've developed these individualized plans and are up and running, and will continue to do better.
Thanks, Allison. That's really impressive. Leanne, you're muted.
All right. What's going to happen, right? Monique, thank you for allowing those questions to come in. There's been so much content. This has been amazing. Alicia, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, if I could ask one more question. One of the concerns that I have is the fact that making contact with a student isn't really identified in what format that will happen, and at least I heard that there were various types of I guess I should say various types of ways that can happen, and some of them I think are more meaningful types of contact than others. And I'm just wondering if you've considered a way, and I don't know if using the synchronous learning term is the right term, but just having a more, at least, once a week or a couple of times a week, a more routine, predictable structure. Like I saw Mrs. Crosby's morning announcement, and that's such an important time for the kids' routines, and really I think related to their well-being and expectations, and sort of understanding, okay, this is still my school day, and things are still moving on. And so I can understand the reason why asynchronous learning may be the best fit, but I just wonder if there's a way to do at least some form of synchronous learning, to check in with these kids, to have eyeballs on them, to see where they're struggling, and then be able to support them in that. And also, I think it's just a real way for the teachers to be able to still enforce, you know, we're still learning. This is still your you know, your educational program. And so I'm wondering if that's been discussed at all, and if you have any ideas about that.
Yes, it's been discussed. And I think, you know, building routines, I think, is going to be an important piece. You know, early on, we were planning for about 2 or 3 weeks. Now it's 6 weeks. And so one of the things I've been trying to keep in mind is, okay, wait a minute, let's start thinking longer term here, just in case. And so I think that's going to be important as we, from this point, planning forward, that we do start, that our teachers do start building routines with students. The way we're also trying to bring everyone's comfort level and expertise up to a certain level in running those kinds of applications. And I'm trying to put some guidelines together for teachers on some important information, like you probably don't want to be recording some of these meetings, because if you're recording meetings with students, that now becomes subject to FERPA. You know, there's all kinds of pieces that we're learning as we're going along. So I think it's a great idea. And we are starting to have some of those discussions. Again, it's just time. We'll continue those discussions when we meet on Tuesday with the Leadership Council.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Thank you. I think we're good to hop into the grading and reporting piece.
Awesome. So I want folks to understand that this grading and proposal piece is, we've linked it in because many districts have sort of run this, the document, the learning plan document by their boards and approved them, but had no grading and reporting pieces in there because it was so early on, they were still thinking they were only going to be out for a week or two. We're taking a longer range perspective here, but I still see this as a temporary solution, and this is our thinking at this point in time. So in terms of some background information, our principals engaged with the leaders in their building, the teacher leaders in their building, and their teacher leaders were saying to them, we need some direction, particularly middle school and high school as the quarter was closing. So these ideas have been discussed by leadership teams. They haven't been discussed by every single staff member across all the schools. And these are short-term solutions under time-sensitive conditions. Quarter 3 is ending tomorrow. And so parents and students were not engaged just because of the time piece and the mechanisms we have available. So our goal in this proposal around grading and reporting is we want to ensure that there are fair opportunities for all students and accurate communication of progress. We want to recognize also, this isn't just happening in Scarborough-Maine. This is a global issue for both K-12 education and higher education. Instruction and assessment are currently different, and we're going to have to adjust, and we're going to have to be flexible. We are not going to be keeping students behind if we don't come back into session next year. It's not going to impact their progress or their course selections. We've gotten quite a bit of the year in. We are, though, going to have to adjust and scaffold when we come back. So we want, using that same final grade that we always have been, and keeping those course expectations the same, it's inequitable for all students during these times. We need to remember that all educational institutions are experiencing these same challenges. And we have been reaching out to our colleagues to find out what they are doing as well. So for grades K through 5, in consultation with the building principals who are in consultation with their lead teachers, trimester 2, which ended on March 19th, they had a timeline to get their grades in. So they've adjusted that timeline and they're going to use the same system. Unfortunately, given safety issues, printing and mailing those reports just exceeds our capacity at this point in time. It doesn't mean we aren't going to ever do it. We just can't do it right now. So for K5 for trimester 3 for the end of the year, excuse me, we're going to use the same system for feedback to students because students are familiar with that. But what the principals would like to do is place a final grade entry, which would utilize what we call special codes, which is more of a technical term. It really means we're coming up with new grading symbols and using those. And we would be adding these to our database because our grading database is so interconnected. We don't want to change anything within the system. So our thinking is sufficient evidence of engagement in distance learning. So that -DL really refers to distance learning, and then insufficient evidence of engagement in distance learning. We may have some students who are unable to engage in these learning activities, and we want to record that. It doesn't mean they're not going to continue learning when they come back. They certainly will. But we wanted to make sure that it was an accurate communication. So for middle school and high school, and they're not on trimesters, remember they're on quarters. The quarter 3 ends April 3rd. And so their final grade will be based on performance prior to March 16th, because the majority of the quarter was completed. We do want to extend that timeline for students to complete work through April 10th. So teachers will be reaching out to students and letting them know if they're missing some things, what the teachers might want to have them turn in. And then so the percentages in PowerSchool will still show up. But we want to use this special codes or these new grades to indicate that the student has passed, they're doing fine, but it's this distance learning period of time. But also use insufficient evidence. And for middle school students, they can still, after the grades close, will be able to make up that work as well, so they can end up with a P-DL. But remember, those percentage grades will still display on the student's score sheet. For quarter 4, for the end of the year, we're going to need to be flexible with due dates and missing assignments and adjust the content. We know that. But use those special codes, and there may be some new codes that they're working on, to give students feedback on assignments and assessments along the way. And then the final grades will be the same codes used as quarter 3. One of the challenges at the middle school is some of the courses only meet once or twice in a 4-day rotation. And so the challenge there is, for example, in art, there were long-term projects that students have not completed. And so the teachers might have only 1 or 2 pieces of evidence to show what students have learned during quarter 3. It's not like at the high school where all courses, even electives, meet in the same frequency, except for science, meet in the same frequency as all other courses. So at the middle school, the teachers and the lead teachers were very comfortable and wanted to use these new codes because it best represented what students were doing. They would be hard pressed to develop a percentage system in this 3rd quarter, and in the 4th quarter, a percentage system in this remote environment that would be fair for all students. For the high school, again, temporary, quarter 3, which ends Friday, we would be extending it, and it would be based on the student's performance up through March 16th. And the final grade entry will be the percentage scores that students earn. And the reason for that is the majority of the quarter has passed. Teachers can adjust based on this distance learning time, this time we've been out. And then for quarter 4, for the end of year and semester 2, again, that flexibility with due dates, missing assignments, they're going to have to adjust their content. But the percentage scores will be used on assignments and assessments to provide that feedback to students, but then use those special codes, pass for distance learning and insufficient evidence for distance learning. But also note that that percentage grade will still display on the student score sheet. Teachers are going to have to adjust their grading expectations, and department heads will be working with their departments in order to ensure that those grading expectations are fair to all students. So there are reporting implications for the high school. While the high school doesn't issue a paper report, the middle school still issues a paper report. And again, like K5, we're just unable to distribute those papers. But high school has additional implications. For example, credit. Credit is earned by semesters, not by quarters. And students who earn that P-DL will receive credit. And students who receive an insufficient evidence won't receive credit until the sufficient evidence is provided. And there will be mechanisms for students, even after the year ends into next year, to be able to change that. So it's not a forever mark. GPA is another issue we've had conversations around. Our seniors are unaffected just because of the way GPA calculations are done. They're done for seniors. For juniors and below, there is consideration. We're having conversations about adjusting the GPA calculations around these semesters. Understand this is one semester of reporting differently in 8 semesters of a high school education. So transcripts is another piece, because we use our transcripts and our school profiles to communicate to post-secondary institutions. Our senior placement counselor, Robin Conley, has been in communication with a variety of post-secondary institutions. The general consensus is that college admissions offices will be making adjustments. They understand this is a global pandemic. Everyone is being affected, and our students will not be at a disadvantage. So between using these new codes, getting that reassurance, as well as looking at the possibility of adjusting our GPA calculations to exclude this semester in that, and then use our transcript and school profiles to communicate these changes, we feel like it is a great solution to this temporary issue around distance learning. And that is that. And I'm happy to entertain questions.
Great, thank you. Before we go to questions, looking at the time, it's 9:17.
Oh my word.
Oh yeah, under policy BE, we need to make a motion to extend tonight's meeting beyond the 9:30 timeline in order to take up our new business. Is there a
motion to extend the meeting beyond 9:30?
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. And if we could do the roll call vote.
Sorry, I didn't have my little list handy here. Ms. Jorgen?
Yes.
Mrs. Giftos?
Yes.
Dr. Gill?
Yes.
Ms. Caselonis?
Yes.
Ms. Layton?
Yes.
Mrs. Sider?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Sure, why not?
Thanks.
Thank you. Hillary, your hand is up.
Yeah. So I have a couple questions about the reporting. You answered a lot of them though. Thank you, Monique. I'm just wondering the sufficient evidence and insufficient evidence. Again, I know I think I'm like harping on the K2 level, but at the K2 level, how do you expect teachers to gather that because they're not turning in assignments. They're not, I guess I'm just wondering how that, I can see easily how that evidence could be collected at the middle school and the high school. I can't speak to Wentworth because I don't have a kid, but I assume like 5th grade probably is pretty easy. But then those younger kids, I'm just wondering what that would look like.
It could look like a number of different things. If there are paper products or things, we could work with families for families to take photos of those pieces. We also have Seesaw, which is a portfolio online application that we did just started to roll out. And Courtney Graffius, our tech coach, is very busy helping teachers get onto that application, which is a great way for students to upload their work and show what they know. So we're primarily those 2 tools, but that is going to be a question that is going to create much discussion for all of our principals and for our teachers as well.
Okay, so because right now those students aren't being asked to do any of that. That's something you're seeing in the future? Can I?
Yes, the longer it's a tough one again, because when we were first starting out with this, thinking it was 2-3 weeks, now it's longer. We will be most likely shifting our communications with parents and asking for increased support in helping us to get a sense of what our students know at this time.
Okay.
Or through the end of the year.
I just, oh my God, what is just some feedback from Seesaw. It's really unwieldy for kids to be able to connect with each other and their teachers. You can't directly comment on each other's posts. And I think a lot of teachers don't realize that because like if you're an owner, you have the option of commenting. But if you're not an owner, you don't have the option of commenting. And so teachers are saying things like, let me know what you did on the weekend, comment below, but that's not an option for the kids.
Okay, I'll have a conversation with Courtney and then with the principals to find out. That could be on our end where teachers are just learning to use the software.
Yeah.
And I do think, to Monique's point, you know, when this plan was first rolled out, it really was with the intent that teachers were designing 2 weeks worth of instruction. And so the way in which they approached that was very different than now that we're looking at, you know, 6 or 7 weeks. And so, you know, this was the second week. The plan that will be posted tomorrow that our teachers fully participated in. The first week was planned by instructional coaches and principals. And so, you know, there has been a lot of legwork done by everyone in terms of how can we help everyone to become acclimated with these features that they may have never used in their classroom before.
Yeah. I think, I guess, from my point of view, everybody is coming together so well and doing such a great job. And I don't mean this to sound nitpicky at all. I just am kind of looking for insight into the process and how it's developing. And I guess I'll just reiterate my plea for the K2 kids, especially. And like I said, I don't have a Wentworth student, so I can't speak to that, but the 6-8 and the 9-12 kids are really well equipped to be able to do some of this. And the K2 kids aren't, and I think they're suffering. So just a increase in the connectivity and maybe some more expectations around that now that we know that it is going to be longer would go a long way, I think.
And to your point, our 6 through 12 students engage in the use of technology in their classrooms on a regular basis, right? They have the Google Classroom platform. They're constantly producing electronic work. And so for our younger students who really don't rely on technology for their day-to-day work in their classrooms to the same extent, there's just a multitude of new learning here all around for adults, for students. It's just amazing how all of this has morphed in just a few short weeks.
There are two questions that came in under the Q&A that I'd like to pop in before we go to you, Alicia. First, Monique, can you clarify the graduation requirements, the total number of credits needed, and how these break down by category? The school website is stating one thing and guidance is stating another.
Oh my, that might lead to some confusion. Graduation requirements as I have them in the handbook. And I would need to double check with Sue Ketch because I'm not sure. The most current graduation requirements are posted in policy. And so what I have here, I don't know the site, the date, but right here, class of 2020, it's 21 credits. English 4, social studies 3, math 3, science 3, fine arts 1 credit, health a half credit, PE 1 credit, technology is a half credit, and then it says 5 credits in electives. We've also talked, had a little bit of discussion, particularly for seniors, depending on what they're doing, and students who have sufficient credits. We might look at coming back to the board and shifting some of those requirements during this time, if it's in students' best interest. And then for the class of 2021, it would be a total of 22 credits, with the difference being 6 credits of electives.
Thank you very much. And the other question was, based on what you had shared, does this mean that the high school teachers are grading their assignments?
Yes.
Thank you.
Depends on the course. It depends on the what you mean by grading, but yes, that they should be providing. I see grading as providing feedback to students. They should be providing that feedback to students.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alicia? And you're on mute.
Sorry, I got caught up on trying to read the document. Okay, so my question is related to the grading as well, about whether teachers are grading their assignments or not. Can I ask first about, I guess, just about the high school? If I understand it correctly, for Q3 at least, teachers are grading the assignments. They're reporting the assignments for like the Power School purposes, but then the kids either get a pass or insufficient evidence. Is that right?
Well, let me clarify. One of the things we have asked teachers to put on hold, again, I'm going back to, we've got to be careful of our time frame. For the first 2 weeks, it was keep the learning going, and teachers were pausing on whether or not to grade things, even at the high school. And now we're saying, with this proposal and knowing that this plan is going to keep going, we are now going to be asking teachers to do that grading and provide that feedback to students. So in terms of this proposal, we're asking teachers to now continue to grade those assignments as they have, using those percentage scores in the way that they have been doing for their courses. What will happen at the end of when they submit their grades, when grades are to be finalized, they are going to put in that category for the quarter grade. They're going to use those codes as opposed to the percentages.
And so what's the purpose of the grade then? Just for feedback to the student?
Less so for feedback to the student, more so in terms of reporting to schools, universities, their transcript, those pieces.
Can I just clarify, you're talking about Q3, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, quarter
Quarter three
three.
is gonna have
of the hi-
grades
Quarter three of
still
the high
graded.
school will be the same percentage grades. I'm sorry. I thought we were talking quarter four.
It's not going to have the pass or fail?
No, not for quarter three, because middle school will be using the new codes because of the different amounts of time that courses have in order for the learning over quarter three. High school will stay the percentage grade for quarter three.
How will the pass fail thing, how will
Wait,
that
I'm
translate
still,
to our
can I still
semester
finish
grades?
up? Because I'm going to
Oh,
lose
yeah, sorry.
train of thought. Sorry. So I'm looking at the document that you provided to us, and I don't know how to show you what I'm looking at, but it says final grades for quarter three. Proposing the addition of new special codes added to the grade book. They will be used in place of percentage scores for final quarter grades, semester, and end of year, depending on the extent of the school closure.
Are you in the high school section?
I thought I was.
I think that's the middle school explanation.
Okay, that's the middle school. So okay, it was for the high school, it's going to be a number, but the number is going to be based on what period of time? They're going to be graded on work that was
The number
completed.
will be primarily based on the work that was accomplished prior to March 16th.
And what happens to the work that's turned in after March 16th up until April 10th?
That can be included in the grade. Absolutely.
I mean, some of the feedback that I've had and I agree with is that, I mean, there's no way to ensure that that's the students, you know, if you're taking a test, for example, it's the student's work, right? You're assured of that. And right. We're not assured of that. So that does.
Absolutely. And that's part of the challenge in this new environment that our teachers are struggling with, is how do we do this business? And that's why we said, okay, put a pause on the grading and the assessing for the short term. And now we do need to report something. And so teachers, under the leadership of the department heads, we're going to be asking them to decide how they want to do their grading for quarter three. They feel comfortable enough that enough of the majority of the quarter has gone by that they can use those grades. Individual departments will decide the extent to which during this time period, what impact those grades will have on that quarter grade.
Can I add one piece that might help?
Sure.
Who is that?
It says Sue Ketch on my screen and it sounds like Sue Ketch.
I'm looking at my document, so I just hear voices now.
So one thing that we are encouraging staff is that new work that was started this week, we've asked them to make a due date for the assignments to be April 6th or later, which will push that grading into fourth quarter automatically because the quarter ends on the 3rd. So anything that they've done for new work this week will be part of the, they can get a numerical grade as an assessment or formative feedback, but ultimately for quarter 4, it will be a pass, a P for passing with numbers there for students to get some reflection on how well they have mastered that material.
Well, let me ask you this then. Why aren't we doing that for all grades after we move to the distance learning piece?
Well, for us, I'm thinking of it this way. The first week, the week of the 13th was a pause week. The second week we categorized it in 3 ways for students to either to catch up if they needed to catch up, if they had an assignment that they still owed on the 13th, to do that, to do a little review with classes, and to enrich but we were not entering any new grades. This week, we are adding the notion of new learning. But again, we have asked teachers to put the grading for anything done this week into fourth quarter, meaning that they're going to date the due date April 6th or later, so that it will fall into the grading, the new way of grading for fourth quarter.
That makes sense to me, but that's not what the document says.
Well, in practice, what we're telling teachers to do is to push any new learning this week into fourth quarter. So staff will be very clear on that tomorrow when we push this out after it's approved tonight, hopefully.
And that is the ever evolving nature of our situation in terms of problem solving as we're moving along, in terms of what makes the most sense for students. So the high school is working on, Sue and her leaders have decided that that's in the best interest of students moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just am concerned that what's before us is not consistent with the practice. And so I'll leave it at that. Can I ask my other question, or am I supposed to go through we'll make our loops?
Back the loop.
Okay, that's fine.
Kristen
Thank you.
Actually next up, and then Nick, Max, April. Kristen.
Wait, is it my turn?
Yes.
Okay. I was just like, that kind of concerns me because I know a bunch of students who've been like hoping to take a test or a quiz before this quarter ends to bring their grade up. And I know just for me personally, the teachers haven't been assigning any tests or quizzes and like grading them because, I don't know, they haven't really figured that out yet. So I just feel like that puts some kids at a disadvantage when they're hoping to bring their grade up and then they don't really have that opportunity anymore, because maybe it's just some of my classes that our homework doesn't get graded. It's just kind of like not even a completion grade, but it's only like tests and quizzes that are graded and that are put in Power School. I don't know if you could address that more.
I have that same issue as Kristen. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that what we're saying is in this plan that Ms. Ketch has articulated means that you can't add to your third quarter grade. Because what my understanding of what would happen is that teachers would be reaching out to students to identify what additional pieces they might want or need to do in order to close out quarter three. And in my mind, that would include opportunities to improve that quarter three grade. That's the kind of flexibility that I envision. That's something that Ms. Ketch can bring back to her ILT to talk about.
Yeah, and I think that would be great. From my personal experiences, like we had tests and quizzes scheduled for before the quarter ended, but then we haven't taken them because obviously we're doing online learning now. And so I just know, like for myself personally, but I'm guessing for like every other student, like that puts them at a disadvantage where they could end up with a lower grade than what they wanted. They don't really have the opportunity that they might have had to make it up.
I think that's a great point, and that's one of the messages that we want to keep communicating, is that we want to make sure that this time out away from school does not negatively impact your performance or your grades. And so for me, when we talk about increased flexibility, that's a perfect example of that, is for our teachers to find opportunities to allow you to show what you know.
Okay. And then I just had a question. So for like transcripts, when we have this like pass fail for quarter four and then this grade for quarter three, what's going to show up on the transcript? Is it going to be the pass fail or the like numeric grade? I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, we've in talking with our data team and the folks who work on the transcripts, those object reports, we're still talking about that. It would be the pass-DL would show up on the transcript, but we started having conversations about the possibility of also doing a percentage. But that would involve redesigning the transcript. It might be easier to just put a note on that. So we're going to be looking at transcripts as well as our student profiles, school profile sheets to describe some of that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Monique, you've actually answered a lot of my questions. So my question is whittled down to a very small one, which is for fourth quarter in particular at the high school. Can you just explain really quick, why did we go, instead of doing a pass fail, why did we go to a pass not enough evidence? Because there was a line on the document that concerned me where it seemed like someone could either pass, which means they get a D- or higher or whatever, to relate it to letter grades, or they just haven't done enough yet, so we're going to give them as much time as they need. I worry about that losing some accountability with our students, because I think we've all said at some point, you know, our high school students use technology every single day. And I've had a few teachers reach out to me and express some concern about losing a measure of accountability here. So I just wanted to ask that question.
Sure. These are unusual times. And I think it's important that we don't allow any students to fail during this time. And so I would rather see insufficient evidence and provide the benefit of the doubt and the opportunity for students to be able to make that up rather than a fail and it's over. And that also will mean putting some pretty robust supports in place. It serves the same purpose in some respects. The student doesn't earn the credit. And that's really where I think that is where the motivation will come to provide sufficient evidence and receive remediation to make sure that students are successful during this time.
Can I add in one thought?
Of course.
I just want to say, Nick, I think it's a real delicate balance that we don't want to say you're passing no matter, you know, if you do anything, nothing at all, you'll still be passing. But at the same time, I also want to balance that. And we've talked about this as a group. We all want to balance the fact that some students, for reasons that may well be out of their control right now, may just not be able to do this work as they normally would do. And we want to at least provide them the opportunity to get caught up and earn that passing grade at some point if when they're back here in session, maybe it is over the summer, but maybe it's in the fall. We just keep coming back to the notion of do no harm. And I want kids to be able to recover from this if their situation right now is that they just can't do this work for any number of reasons. Could be their responsibilities at home. It could be mental health and wellness that is just in this stressful time more than they're able to cope. I want them, I don't want to do harm, but at the same time, I want to make it that students understand that they need to be doing this schoolwork and participate, that a passing grade is just not an automatic. So we're trying to kind of do that balance.
Well, no, and thank you. That clarification is really helpful because I was thinking of it through the lens of academic integrity, where there may be, and maybe not, but there may be some students who see this as just an extended vacation and like, it won't matter, I can make up the work whenever I want. Now you hope that no one has those thoughts, but the people you're talking about, that's where our effort and our energy needs to be. So I really appreciate you guys are trying to find the value in that and the balance in that. And thank you for adding that clarification.
You're welcome.
Because I can't raise my hand, I just wanted to say that I popped in line for a question, but Max, you're up.
So I guess I kind of had similar concerns to Nick about students taking their initiative. So I'm pretty sure at some point you had mentioned how teachers would still be grading our assignments with a percentage grade, but at the end of the quarter, we would be receiving either the pass or insufficient evidence. And I find it sort of counterintuitive that the teachers are going to go to basically all the trouble of grading our assignments with numerical values for us to like that will basically not really come to fruition on our transcripts. I know for me personally, and a lot of people that are in the same boat as me, like second semester, junior year is the most important time for colleges. And I know that Mrs. Connolly, she had like met with college admissions officers, and they had assured her that, you know, it would be okay. But I know personally, I'm trying to get into some really elite schools, and I just don't know if like, I don't know if just pass fail on my transcript will cut it, where I'm trying to really just like be really impressive to colleges. Can you offer any insight on that?
Sure. Colleges don't just look at that grade on the transcript. They also look at your GPA. They also look at other pieces of evidence. Colleges see a lot of grades. They see a lot of different grades. And what helps our students stand out are all the other things that they do. And so I think the GPA and adjusting the GPA is what is going to help. I think that the other things that you do, particularly that essay, is important, and what a wonderful experience to go through in some respects, and a wonderful opportunity to write about, but how you're managing and dealing with these uncertain times as a college essay. So I think it's not just about the grades. So I think that, and that the universities know that everyone is in the same boat in this. So it really is about what will happen the fall of your senior year when things are back to normal. And it's also, what are you doing during this time that you could add to your portfolio or to that common app?
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That actually helps out a lot. Thank you.
You're welcome.
April?
So my question is more, again, it's more procedural. I just want to make sure I understand what's coming up on the agenda in terms of our action items. We have, the DOE has asked us to approve the program of studies for distance learning, correct? Like that's a requirement for us now?
Yeah, so
are they also, is the grading piece a required component of that?
No. So and again, the DOE isn't even asking for us to submit a copy of whatever this approved plan is to them. The logistical piece is that we bring our plan to you as our board for approval for our students, and then we document to the state that we got that approval at this board meeting on this date, and that's the verification. They do not want to micromanage our plans, or, you know, they really are saying it's local control. If your board says that this plan, you know, meets the current need, and then they're accepting of that.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure I understood what the requirement was versus the greater conversation we're kind of having as a community.
Right. Understood.
Thank you.
Alicia?
So I've got two questions. One is, I understand the exigency for quarter 3. But I'm not sure why we're making the decision for Q4 now, given the fact that things could change and we may be able to relieve some of the concerns like Max has about his semester grade if we prolong it. And also we could solicit some feedback from the community and the students. And so I'm wondering if that's necessary now, the Q4 grading.
Well, I think in all fairness to our teachers, in order for them to plan and prep in this very new environment and communicate with their students and adjust their course expectations, I think they need some sort of direction in and around Q4, which starts Monday.
Well, but I mean, if they're going to be grading anyways, why can't we take a week and solicit input and circle back around? It's such a pivotal decision.
I had that same confusion actually. Yeah.
For these kids, I mean, it impacts their semester grade, and so I guess I can get the Q3, but I mean, if they're grading, if the teachers are grading anyways, why can't we put off the sort of the ultimate decider, the pass fail, just to shorten the discussion, versus the grading on the final report, and allow the conversation to include all of our stakeholders and really think about what that means. Why can't we do that?
Well, I just need some clarification.
Okay.
Are you primarily concerned about the high school in Q4, or are you talking about Q4 for the middle school as well? And then what about trimester 3 for the K-5s?
I think I worry the most about the high school, just because it can impact their future, right? And so I'm really worried about the kids like Max that are, you know, in this important year, and this decision could impact them, and not saying hold on, let's really just stop. The teachers can do their grading, and we can, you know, send out a survey monkey or something and see if there are things that we're not considering, and hear the preference of the community.
We can, that's up to the board. I'm happy to do what the board asks. We can gather as much feedback in as equitable a manner as we can. The processes that for example, the middle school and the high school went in when we were talking about long-term grading policies took quite a bit of time.
Yeah.
And so that's my worry, quite honestly. I think our building principals can get some feedback from staff relatively quickly. But in order to get broad range input from staff, that means designing a survey, that means putting that out there, that means gathering it, that means interpreting it, that means including the staff as well in that process to then make another recommendation. I'm hard pressed to see that happening within a week. It would be hard to do that well in a week. That's my only concern, but I'm happy to do what ever the superintendent directs me to do.
Okay, thank you. And then can you just clarify for me, when you were doing your slide presentation, I thought you said something about adjusting the GPA calculation. What does that mean?
In other words, GPA calculations are based on, there's weighted GPA and unweighted GPA, and GPA calculations are taken at different points in time, at the end of the sixth semester and the end of the 7th semester for different purposes. So one of the things we were thinking about is just eliminating this semester out of the GPA for our students, so it wouldn't count in the GPAs.
Okay.
That's one possibility. That's one piece that's under discussion at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
Could the discussion about GPAs be a discussion that we have with students? Because I think a lot of students would not support taking this semester out of their GPAs.
Yeah, that's not a decision that's been made, and that I'm sure there would be a process in place around that.
Monique, I think there's a confusion. We're not talking about taking Q3 out of the grades. We're talking about taking Q4 out of the GPA.
No, it's GPA is semesters. It's a semester grade.
Okay.
And so I understand the concern that Max was expressing is that a whole lot of students have put a whole lot of effort already into this semester. And it should count within the GPA. I'm just sharing ideas about what we're trying to puzzle out.
I would, this is Sue again. I would just like to register that even in meeting with the ILT today, the teachers are hungry for a decision and a plan so that they can plan accordingly. They feel like they've been in limbo around grading for 3 weeks now, and they really would like some clarity and decisions on this so that they can plan Q4 accordingly. I just wanted to share that notion for them.
Why wasn't this document shared with teachers?
It just a flat out time piece.
I mean, we got it on Monday though. Why? And I know the teachers received a communication, at least at the high school level, I think on the 17th. So why wasn't that circulated so that we could hear from them?
Because of the time sensitivity piece, gathering that feedback this week, I'm not sure we would have been able to gather that feedback. And quite frankly, we were relying on the leadership, the teacher leaders within the schools as representing their teachers within the schools. So it was, I will take responsibility for it. It was just a time sensitivity piece.
I've got 2 questions, one that came in on the Q&A and then a question that I have. For the juniors that maybe you're going to come through because, to Kristen's point, they did not get a chance to boost their grade on the last couple of tests for Q3, what happens to them if they get the, they don't pass? How do they make up those credit hours knowing that they'll probably have packed calendars going into their senior year, and there's no guarantee that we're going to be able to open up for summer session to get those hours accounted for?
Yeah, that what we refer to as that credit recovery process. We're in the process of brainstorming ideas around that. We've been doing that for quite some time. There are online coursework. There's also the possibility of taking a look at what the student is missing from that coursework and providing that evidence and getting that remediation and that evidence on just those pieces that child is missing, as opposed to taking a whole nother course all over again. Okay. So we're having conversations or starting to have conversations about all those possibilities.
Okay, so there's some flexibility here. That's great.
Yeah, that's one of the pieces we're trying to build in here. Again, is flexibility and adjusting expectations to make sure that we can meet the needs of the students.
Great. And then another question, has there been a decision made about what would actually earn a pass for distance learning? Is there a cutoff point?
That would be something that I would rely on the building, the teacher leaders and the teachers to determine. Yeah, at each of the phases, at the middle school and also at the high school.
Okay, great. Thank you. Kristen, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Can you share how much information we have on what surrounding districts are doing and possibly what other states are doing so that we know we're not way out of whack and students like Max won't be compared to a different?
Yeah, so I'm happy to provide you with some of that information. We meet with Cumberland County superintendents and assistant superintendents a couple of times a week virtually right now, trying to work through many of these dilemmas that are being posed for us. And so everyone has kind of been in flux in trying to come to some decisions about this. But some information that I have culled together from some of our, I would say, comparative districts or folks that we might, align ourselves with as we think about doing work. Yarmouth is submitting a proposal for a meets or does not meet for second semester. That hasn't been brought to their school board yet. The high school was just finalizing that, and the superintendent was literally just in receipt of that this afternoon and was reviewing that when I spoke with him. Gorham is staying the course with high school grades. At their middle school, they are considering moving to a pass or needs more evidence. And at their elementary levels, they talked about providing feedback in regards to ELA and math. York is keeping their grading consistent, but folding quarters 3 and 4 into one big ranking period. So if you see here, you can see there's this everyone's doing something different kind of model. And just as we have been in the meeting tonight, I heard from Kennebunk, and they are pushing out information to their public in regards to a pass or insufficient evidence at even at high school for second semester. I certainly have lots of other, Cumberland County districts, but I really tried to pull those. Cape Elizabeth at last check had not made a final decision. They were looking at having the first semester weight more heavily than the second semester in the overall year calculation. And we're thinking about realigning the weight that assessments would have in grading so that assessments would have a lesser weight on a quarterly or semester grade.
But still doing grades?
Excuse me?
But still doing grades in Cape?
Yeah, but just changing all the weighting of them. And then Falmouth was at last check considering a pass or incomplete. And for right now, that while they're still in this process, they were holding off on summative assessments. So everyone is really struggling over this.
So just less than a week ago, both Diane and I sat in with the high school principals regionally. We're meeting and sharing ideas, and many of them were up in the air and were floating lots of different ideas. And that's where this past insufficient evidence surfaced and was discussed. And now, as they're working through their process within a week's time, we have actually another meeting, another remote meeting with them tomorrow. We'll be overlapping with the budget meeting and first thing in the morning, but we hope to get some more information there. And while we do like to know what's going on with our neighbors, I would just remind the board, and I'm sure you've heard me say this, our students are not competing with Cape, Falmouth, and Yarmouth. They're competing internationally with many universities accepting students from all over the world with lots of different grading systems. And so we really do care quite a bit about how we market our students. Robin Conley, the senior placement counselor, it does a great job staying current with her knowledge of what's going on the higher ed circuit. I sign lots of her professional forms as she goes and visits and has communications and networks with similar counselors all around the country.
Thank you.
Hillary?
So I guess I understand some of the discomfort around not having asked every teacher what their opinion is and not getting community input. I think because based on what our district has the huge changes that we had in years past, and frankly the fight over grading. But I respect that we are in a really strange situation. And I respect that there are timing issues. And I agree that we don't have time to put a Survey Monkey out and ask every teacher or community member what they think. And in fact, I would be a little bit concerned that the input that we got from the community would be inequitable and possibly lack understanding of the inequity issues that we're facing as we look at students who may not be able to do the work for whatever that reason may be. And I just think, you know, what Sue said, the way she put it, that she, or maybe it was Monique, I don't remember at this point, but you know, that you're not looking to do any harm. So I think that students who have the work available and are getting feedback on it in the form of grades are, you know, they're going to be motivated to do that work, and kids who can't do it. And we can't sit here and judge why they can't do it at this point in time. So to me, I think what you have is fine. I also have looked a little bit at some districts in other parts of the country where they're doing a grade for students, but not allowing it, no failing grades. Like you can do better, but you can't do worse. So, you know, if you want to, I guess what I'm saying is that I don't have any problem approving any of this tonight. I certainly don't have a problem approving the distance learning plan. And I know that that's changing constantly and that you are open to feedback about it. But in terms of the grading, I don't really have a problem with it. I don't think that, I guess I don't think that waiting a week is going to be worthwhile. I think that teachers are, you know, as much as we would value their input in a normal situation, we are trying the best we can to get that input through lead teachers and building administrators and anecdotal evidence about what's going on for, you know, in their practice. And that's what we can do for now. Q4 starts tomorrow. And I agree with Sue. I don't necessarily think it's fair to keep them waiting for information on what we expect. I can't shut it off. It's on silent. Okay, sorry, I'm done.
All right, that's the end of the questions. Monique, this was excellent. Thank you for putting together a really detailed slide deck and for being able to answer all the questions that we have raised tonight. This is unprecedented. No one ever plans for, you know, you plan for them, maybe a building, maybe a server goes down. You never plan that your entire community is going to be in a quarantine situation or isolated. So the fact that we have something so quickly and so robust and really well thought out. Thank you guys, all of the administration, for what you've done with that to get us to this point. I know there's some gaps in there, and I'd love to believe that however we move forward tonight, that pieces can be addressed as they come up, and that we're going to continue to be reactive and reactionary to the ever-changing environment that we're in.
Thank you. I very much appreciate the feedback and the questions. It helps us do a better job. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Monique.
Thank you, Monique. Thank you.
Thank you.
See if I can get this stuff. Given, and I don't know if you can see my screen or not, if the report is up. Given where we are on time tonight, I am going to bypass the chair's report. Just wanted to let you know.
Leanne, can I make a motion that we just axe all the reports for tonight and just go to new business, given the timing?
Yeah, that's fine by me.
Okay.
Only if your motion includes the word axe.
Can we 86 the, I would like to make a motion to 86 the reports for tonight.
Second.
Second.
All right. We'll need to do a roll call vote.
Ms. Durgan?
Yes, please.
Mrs. Giftos?
Yes.
Dr. Gill?
Absolutely.
Ms. Kazalounis?
Yes.
Ms. Layton?
Yes.
Mrs. Seither?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell?
Yes, for sure.
And Mr. Bennett?
I worked hard on that presentation, but sure.
We'll move it
Matt,
into the next
we'll look
meeting.
at it.
It's beautiful. I highly recommend it.
Already.
Okay. Moving into new business. I'd like to make a motion for approval of the school distance learning plan that we've just discussed.
Second. Oh, wait, did you move that?
I was requesting a motion to move.
Oh, so moved.
Second.
Okay. Given the very robust conversation, I'd like to open this up for quick comments if possible, unless everyone is, so I should get the participants back. Oh, there we go. Okay. Sarah, you're first.
Yeah, I just want to clarify April's earlier point. We're just approving the distance learning plan, correct? And that is exclusive. That's not including the grading. That doesn't need to be. That doesn't itself doesn't need to be approved. Is that what we're voting on?
I think
I mean, they were saying, she said that they're waiting for us for the grading.
So to clarify the DOE piece, the DOE, we need to just demonstrate that our overall distance learning plan is approved by the board. That being said, it is very important for us to get a sense of where the board is with the proposal for the grading and reporting plan so that we can report back to individual administrators and teachers.
Gotcha. Okay, so it is everything. So I guess I didn't really ask many questions, but I was just absorbing. I tend to agree, you know, with some of the comments that Hillary's making about the flexibility. I greatly appreciate that everything that all the hard work that you all have done, and you know, these are, as you said, many times in Monique, unprecedented times, and I think we're moving forward at the best rate that we can. And I think as long as you guys are all open to hearing and being flexible and pivoting where we need to pivot and being agile, then you know, this has my support. So thank you.
April?
My comment was the same as Sarah's. I just wanted to clarify whether or not we technically needed to vote on the grading and the distance learning as a package. I don't know. I guess I'm still unsure exactly what we're approving. Are we approving the grading plan as written? Because everyone keeps saying that we're going to be flexible and that we're going to pivot and we're going to move things around accordingly. So I don't really understand the point of voting on the document if it's still a moving target.
I'm going to take a stab at answering that, and Diane, please add in. I think the purpose behind voting is so that we can get this to Maine DOE, that we are agreeing to there being a distance learning plan within the district. And that is, they're not looking for the content, if I understood that correctly, Diane.
Correct.
But they are looking for us to say that, yes, our district has a plan and we are in support of that plan.
I'm concerned about the fact that
my turn.
Well, I'm sorry, but she was clarifying your question, and I don't think that that's the answer we've heard.
So I guess my suggestion would be that perhaps we split those into two different pieces, you know, and take the overall distance learning plan as a motion for approval, and then, you know, your directives about the grading and reporting as a separate. Would that help to parcel those out?
It would for me.
Me too.
Me too.
April, were you still, did you still have a question?
No, I just didn't want Alicia talking during my turn.
Okay, I'm going to lower your hand then. Nick?
Yeah, so I'm kind of thinking along the lines of what Hillary said. And yes, I know we're not required by the DOE to give them this content to the richness that's been developed, which is a lot of work. And I'll say, like everyone else did, thank you for all the hard work. But I also hear Principal Ketch when she says that the teachers in the high school are waiting to be told what to do and to be said, you know, what do I have to do? What do I plan for? How do I structure the rest of the year maybe? And so I guess for me, I'm thinking about, you know, business as usual on the board is we'd work on a policy. There would be several readings. There'd be lots of robust discussion, and we wouldn't sign on the dotted line until we were sure that it was polished and ready, you know, for the next several months or however long. I just don't think we have that luxury here. We don't have the luxury of time. And when I look at approving this document, I look at approving this document, both pieces of it, as living, breathing documents that are still subject to conversation by our leadership and our teachers, that are still subject to the ever-changing environment that we find ourselves in right now. And so I'm personally okay, although it's unsettling, approving something and endorsing something as an ongoing work. I think putting it off leaves our teachers in limbo, which is very difficult. I think, as Sarah said it a minute ago, you know, if as long as everyone can agree that we need to be able to pivot and change and respond to the changing demands of our students, teachers, and community, then I'm okay approving it the way it is, knowing that it's not going to stay the way it is very long.
Thank you. Alicia?
Thank you. I guess I'd like to say that the distance learning plan is something I could support. I don't think that the grading plan is ready, at least as it extends to Q4. I think it's premature, and I actually couldn't disagree with Nick more. I mean, we have identified as our board goals that we're going to solicit feedback from all stakeholders in the decisions that we make, and that we're going to insist upon that from leadership when those decisions are being made as well. I think that there is exigency in determining when we're going to, what the grading procedure will be for Q3. But what I've heard tonight is that the teachers are going to use grades for Q4 no matter what. What's up in the air is the reporting process. That is such a significant decision for so many kids. And to say we have to do it now because we're in the middle of the pandemic, we don't need to solicit opinions from the public or from the teachers. This document has not even been shared with the teachers. I think it's I don't think we're doing what's best for kids if we're not soliciting their opinion and really stopping and saying, okay, you know, everybody's done great work. They've worked hard. Teachers want answers. Kids want answers. The leadership has worked a bazillion hours. It's obvious. But I also think we can say we have a plan for quarter 3. It makes sense. Let's press pause. Everybody's going to grade for quarter 4. Let's solicit some feedback. This is a decision that's important to a lot of people, and I'm talking about really the high school level, because those are the kids that it's really critical for. And I feel strongly about that, because we've all said that's our common shared goal. And to now say, well, yeah, but we're in these different times. Yes, we are in different times, but it's still a goal, and it's still something that I believe that we can achieve. And at the very least, the document should be shared with the teachers. At the very least, it should be feedback should be solicited from the community, and hear what they have to say. And we do have time for that. So I would approve the distance learning plan. And I would approve the quarter 3 grading, because we need to, but I don't think we need to approve the quarter 4 today. And in fact, I think doing that goes against everything that we've said is a common goal for us in our work.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Kristen?
Yeah, I agree with Alicia that if the teachers are collecting grades anyways, we do sort of have some time. And if this document isn't technically required to even have a grading and reporting piece to it, I would like to put it on hold, make sure that we are doing all the work that we need to do before we. And I don't even know. I mean, I guess I'm sort of still a little confused if we even need to sign off on grading and reporting if it's not a DOE requirement. So, but I'm good. But I would like to wait on the high school 4th quarter portion of it.
Okay, Hillary? Who is on mute? There you go.
So, I mean, I stand by what I said earlier. I think that it's fine to approve this, not as a finished document, but as a work in progress. And I think it sounds to me like that's a little bit what, like, April, your sticking point a little bit was like, this isn't a polished document. It's not a finished, we're not voting on a finished document. And that's kind of what Nick was saying too. And if we waited to vote on a finished document, we would never have a vote, because it literally is changing every day and we have to allow for that. So I think that knowing that it's a flexible and evolving document is part of approving it the way it is. I mean, that's what it is. And we're approving that flexibility along with the distance learning plan. I don't have like I said earlier, I don't have a problem with the grading the way it is. If we want to separate it out, I don't really have a problem with that either, but we are laser focusing on 1 quarter of high school. And I think that it's really doing a disservice to the entire rest of the district to do that. So I guess my ask would be that if we do put this aside, that do we think we have enough time to do the work required, not just for the high school, for everyone? And I don't, but that's my opinion.
I'm gonna weigh in on that. I would agree. I don't think we can break out and only look at the high school if we're going to solicit feedback from the community. Out of transparency, I've got a second semester junior. I know how important these grades are. I know that lots of things hinge on this. They hinged on SAT grade scores when it came to merit. there's a lot of pieces that are in play. So I'm really trying hard to not look at it with that focus. I think my concern would be, because it is so important to a subset of the community, will the feedback override what the goal is of trying to solicit it? I agree with the teacher feedback piece. If we've had lead teachers involved, I believe that that is what their role is in soliciting feedback from their peers. I'm really struggling on this. I will support if somebody wants to make a friendly motion or an amendment to the motion to split this into 2 parts, so that we can at least get the DOE requirements done and covered. But I would really want a strong time frame around a second piece of this, that it doesn't carry on indefinitely while we try to obtain more information across the board. Alicia?
Well, could we just split it even more to approving the distance learning plan and approving Q3, and then just deferring, and we can even do it on a time limited basis, deferring the Q4 decision?
But that disregards all of the kids who are on trimesters.
When does the last trimester start?
March 21st.
What?
It's already started. We're in the middle of trimester.
It's the middle of trimester 3. But the grade, I mean, I guess to me, it's the same thing. The grades are still being solicited. And, we need to have I just don't think, I mean, we need to have a quick decision, but I don't think that there's anything that prevents us from sending a letter home to parents at the very least and saying, this is the proposal. We're going to be talking about it next week, the week after. And the same thing with staff. If you have thoughts, please let us know. And considering those thoughts for the final trimester or for the final quarter, I would feel a lot more comfortable with that.
Okay. Is there a friendly amendment to the original motion to split this?
Yes, I'd move to amend the motion so that we approve the distance learning plan as proposed, and we approve the grading structure for everything but the final grading term for all levels, so whether that's a quarter or a trimester, and review that within 2 weeks so that we can solicit input from teachers, students, and parents.
Are those 2 separate motions?
I think so, because that was one heck of a long motion.
That was one big run-on sentence.
So it really sounds like we have 3 motions that we would be breaking it into. The distance learning, the Q3 approved, approved. And then the last semester requiring additional information.
Yes, thank you.
Hillary, I know you've raised your hand, but we need a second to the friendly split before we can discuss.
Second. Just getting in line to discuss.
Okay. Hillary.
Are we discussing the amendment?
Yes.
Or 3? I can't support the amendment because I don't even really get why we're doing it. So we're not required to approve anything except for the distance learning plan. So if we want to take that and approve it by itself, fine. But I'm not willing to take the grading and reporting, which is not required by the DOE for us to approve, and break that up into even further sections. Like I don't understand why we would need to do that. We don't need to approve the way that they're doing Q3 grades. Like to me, it makes zero sense. And I guess I don't understand. I mean, if you want to break it up, fine, break it up and then approve the distance learning plan by itself, and then ask for more clarification if people agree to it about the grading and reporting. But to then go this next step and break the grading and reporting up into different sections, it doesn't make any sense to me. And it just highlights the fact that we're paying so much attention to the high school and what they're doing and not really any attention to any of the rest of the district.
Sarah?
Yeah, mine was going to be like a question for Monique and I guess Sandy and Diane. Like, is 2 weeks even reasonable? And what do we want to see from that? Do we just want to send, like, I think if we're going to give an amendment and give some direction, we have to be very clear as to what we're looking for. So do we want a survey? Like, do we want like just the teachers, parents, students? Like, how do we want to go about it? I think I would like some more information on that, Alicia, but also Monique, I guess from you, like, is 2 weeks reasonable? I think I heard you say earlier that it would be a challenge to do it equitable, sorry, it's really tired, with equity and timeliness.
It will be a challenge. We are working very hard at developing learning plans, reinventing education, working very hard at taking in feedback and adjusting as we're going along. I'm gotta be honest, it's just gonna be tough to do the same level of work that was done when we were making permanent decisions about grading for what in essence is a semester accommodation given these unique situations. I totally understand the concern about high school because our students are moving off to a variety of post-secondary experiences. So I understand the concern over the final grade entry. We are going to be continue to consult with area colleagues. We can certainly share this information with all teachers and seek some feedback. It's not going to be detailed feedback. We just don't have the time to do that. And we can put a survey out, but it's just going to be a challenge, and be real honest about that. We're looking to provide teachers with some guidance tomorrow and community folks tomorrow on some guidance in terms of what they can expect in and around grading. Q4 starts Monday. We're going to delay it a bit, but we've got teachers who need that guidance and need to work together to make accommodations and be more flexible with students. But I understand the concern about that final grade entry piece and in the high school. If it could be just that issue separated, that would be helpful rather than trying to make sense of data that is going to come in from potentially 3,000 families.
I mean, I get that, Monique. I would be happy even with just sending an email home and saying, you know, we're going to be just making this decision, and you know, if you'd like to send us an email so that we can consider your input, then, you know, regarding Q4, you know, give them 2 weeks, knowing
It
that
would be-
the teachers are grading anyways.
Yeah, it would be very simple. It would need to be simple in
Yeah.
order to be processed so quickly.
I would be fine with that. I would feel a lot better with that, and I would be fine with that. I get that you're doing a lot of different things, and I mean, I don't, but I can imagine how hard this must be. But and so, you know, do we need the level of survey? No, you're probably right. But I would feel a lot more comfortable if it was at least an email and a heads up and saying, you know, because they may have information we haven't considered.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Can I just add to that piece? If it was going to go to the homes, could we include the students in that?
Kristen and I can like maybe send out a survey to the student body at maybe the middle school and the high school and ask them for their opinion on, like, we could probably put like a Google form on it they could fill out so we could report that back to you guys.
I appreciate that offer very much. I think that it may be, it may need to come from building administration through teachers. It might be, and we can certainly work on that together. I'm just thinking about the response rate might be better than if it were going out from students at this point. But maybe we can put something together jointly.
April?
I'm just really stuck on whether or not this is even board business. We can vote to approve the distance learning plan. That's what's being asked of us. I feel like at this point, Monique has asked, and what I heard Sue asking for was guidance or some impressions from the board, the direction that we want to go. We've now said multiple times that the grading document is a fluid document. So for me, like, this entire conversation will inform their opinions as they move forward, but it's voting on the grading piece is not something that we have to do. Like, let's just vote on the component that the DOE requires us to vote on.
I agree.
I agree.
Me?
Yes, ma'am.
I totally agree with you, April. I think that I honestly, what I wish we could do was to give each building, I mean, let's be honest, like, not only are our buildings on different schedules, like some are quarters, some are trimesters, but they're such completely different, they're just such completely different animals, right? I mean, you don't grade high school the same way you grade K2. What I wish would happen is that each building had the autonomy to make their own decisions about how they wanted to grade for the last trimester or the last quarter or whatever that is. And I mean, that's just my opinion. But in the end, I agree with you, April. I don't think that if, like I said before, I don't have a problem approving this the way it is, but if we're going to break it up, I feel like our job is to approve the distance learning plan, and the grading and reporting is not. And I also want to just say really quickly, we've talked a lot about putting surveys out and asking people what they think. And I feel like this is a really sensitive topic, more so than other topics, because information is coming so quickly. And I feel like as district leaders, you have a lot more insight into obstacles that can come for students for doing this kind of learning. And I mean, I hate to say this because I love input, but I just am worried that if we get a lot of input from a lot of parents who, you know, let's be honest, well, I have to be careful. I just am not sure that it would come with a full understanding of every student in the district, which I feel like you guys have, and even we don't, but certainly parents at home know their own kids really well, and we can ask them what would work best for their own kids. But when you start asking people what they think of district learning plans for an entire district, I have an issue with that.
Alicia?
Well, so the email that went out to staff was that the school board today would make a decision about the grades for tomorrow. So that's why we're voting on it. And I guess I'm confused. If what you're saying is that so tomorrow, in theory, Sandy could decide that the school permanently will go pass fail, and it wouldn't be the school board's decision. That's counterintuitive to me. We're responsible for the course of study. I mean,
are you asking me?
No, I'm making a comment, and so to say that this isn't our responsibility, I don't know. It's on the agenda. It was told to the teachers that this was the next step in the process. They're expecting us to make a decision, and it seems like that's the type of decisions that we've made before. When it comes to, for example, to PBE, I mean, that was a decision that the school board made. So I guess I'm confused why. And if it's not, it's not. But I mean, I guess I'm confused why it isn't.
I mean, me too. I'm confused whether it is or isn't. That's what I've been trying to get at. And if it is, then I'm not comfortable. And if it isn't, then we need to move forward.
I think the way I see it is that we're not making a decision for the district to make a permanent change. It's so temporary. And so in that sense, I'm like, that's why I understand the need for flexibility in the document, but like, we're not, the grading is also temporary. I mean, nobody's planning on like keeping it this way. And I guess
that's very dismissive of people like Max and Kristen that are expressing to you how significant of a decision this is.
I'm not dismissing anybody. I'm saying that I don't necessarily think that this is a board decision. And I think that Max and Aaron and my daughter who's in high school and all of them are, I'm not saying they're not going to be affected by this. They are, but so is every other student in the entire US. So I just wish that we could give autonomy to each building and let them make decisions on what works best for them as a building. And maybe this is a question for Monique, but like, how does that work?
And not ask parents and students, Hillary?
Yeah.
Because it's going to take 2 weeks. I mean, then I guess that's against all of the goals that we've set for ourselves as a board.
Well, I don't think it is.
I don't understand how you can resolve it. If you're saying we're going to make a decision and we're not going to solicit community input. Well, somebody's going to make a decision.
I'm not saying we're going to make a decision.
And we're not soliciting
I'm saying
input.
that buildings should make the decision, and that it needs to be fast and it's temporary.
It's
And I
not
think
temporary.
that-
It's permanent for those kids in that situation, kids like Max. It's not, I mean, it's not for my kid. It's kids that is particularly in their junior year, though it is permanent for those kids. And it does need to be done with some haste, but it doesn't have to be done loosely and and throw caution to the wind. It can be a reasoned caution decision. The teachers are going to grade no matter what happens. There's no reason to say we can't send an email home and let people know what's on the agenda. And
I don't think giving buildings the authority to make their own decision is throwing caution to the wind. I think that's asking the people who know best what should be done.
And to not give guidance that we're going to seek input from students and parents, that's frightening to me.
Okay.
Kristen?
I mean, I don't know, Leanne, if there's any way to clarify if this is a board decision. To me, if it is a board decision, there is a process that we follow to make these kinds of changes. And this was my question about, is this a policy change? If it's a policy change, we have a process to change policies. If it's not a policy change, I don't know, is this even our choice to make? I still think it's beneficial to give parents a heads up and say, this is what we're thinking, but I don't know. Are we voting on this as a board? Is this our choice to make?
I don't believe it is a policy change. That being said, I think it was really important for us to get your endorsement as a board before we would make a change, even a temporary change, right?
Which I so appreciate, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, you could, in the plan, you could say that this is going to be determined in the next week or two. Because all the DOE wants is the minutes of the meeting. They don't really need the plan. So in your plan, you could just say, we need to pursue this area in the next 2 weeks and make a decision. That's another way around this, if you wanted to do that.
I think, Diane, I mean, we all gave input on what we think about the grading. When you say input, do you mean a vote by the board or just what we think? Because you heard what we think.
We did hear what you think, but I think from our perspective, we would like, kind of either your blessing or your directive to guide us in saying, yes, move forward, or before you move forward, we'd like more information to be found out about X, Y, Z. I think that's how we communicate well together, and we make sure that we're doing the work that you're seeking for us to do.
If that's the case, then I would either do what Sandy suggested and just say that we're working on this last piece of it and give that heads up to teachers, show them the document, show the parents what we're thinking, and just hear very informally, give people a chance to say something.
I think that's a fair way to look at this. That said, we do have a motion that's on the table. It can either be withdrawn and re-amended, or it can be pushed forward, voted down, and a new amendment made.
Wait, can Sandy make the amendment for me? I'll withdraw the amendment.
Okay.
Leanne, will you make the motion?
Sure. Move to approve the school distance learning plan with the understanding that the grading is still being worked on within the district and that communication will be sent to students and parents. How's that?
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, Hillary, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, I have a question. Maybe Monique can speak to this. So I know that the grading and reporting was linked in somewhere, but is it actually a part of the distance learning plan?
No, it does not need to be. The reason why it was linked in is because that's where we are with our process in making that decision.
Right. But
we are sharing this. Sorry?
So is it a part of the distance learning plan or
It's
not?
not a requirement as part of the distance learning plan for DOE purposes.
No, yeah, I know that, but are the documents separate?
Well, they're separate documents because they were developed at different points in time as this school closure became longer and longer. So I linked it into this document so that it would be easy to access.
Okay, so I guess I'm asking in terms of the motion, can't we just approve the distance learning plan, period? And then you could make another motion to find out more information about the grading and reporting. I mean, they're not the same document.
I think that's up to the will of the board. We can certainly gather data over the next couple of weeks, but we are going to need to provide teachers with the direction that they can continue to grade in Q4 until we gather this information and identify whether that's going to steer us in a different direction or not. Because we are still gathering information from our area colleagues as well.
Sarah?
Yeah, I think the motion that's on the table accomplishes that, Hillary. So I think we can vote on that and still have the grading move forward while also collecting more feedback. But that's how I interpreted it anyway.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So now that we have the motion, are we ready to vote?
Holy Moses.
Wait, can I say one thing?
Yes, ma'am.
Before we vote, I just want to say, just because I have feedback that is what I view as constructive feedback, although I don't know how my delivery comes across, it does not mean that I don't appreciate all of the hard work. I mean, I just can't thank you enough. I know that how lucky our district is to have all of your leadership and how much you've worked and how remarkable what you've done is. And so I really hope that my concerns aren't heard as a lack of appreciation for all of that work.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Diane, we're ready.
Okay. Ms. Durgan.
What's the motion again? No, I'm serious. It's to approve the distance learning plan?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Mrs. Giftos.
Yes.
Dr. Gill.
Yes.
Ms. Casalonis.
Yes.
Ms. Layton.
Yes.
Mrs. Seither.
Yes.
Mrs. Turner.
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yep.
All right, thank you. 8.2 is from the policy committee, and I'm wondering if this is something we want to table until the 16th. It's the second reading of the 2021 school calendar.
So moved.
Yeah. Do you need a formal motion, Leanne?
I do. I need a formal motion.
Okay. I move to table agenda item, blah, blah, whatever it is.
8.2, second reading of the 2021 school calendar.
Okay. I move to table agenda item 8.2, the second reading of the 2021 school calendar.
Second.
Okay. Let's move to vote.
Ms. Durgan.
Yes.
Mrs. Giftos.
Yes.
Dr. Gill.
Yes.
Ms. Casalonis.
Yes.
Ms. Layton.
Yes.
Mrs. Seither.
Yes.
Mrs. Turner.
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell.
Yes.
And Mr. Bennett.
Thumbs up.
Thank you.
Okay, 8.3 is also a motion to approve the approval of the building steering subcommittee to be formed by the board with the purpose of negotiating contract with a design firm. This requires an executive session before we can review this. Motion to approve.
What? Approve what?
Tabling the building steering.
Oh,
subcommittee.
tabling. Yes.
Second.
Move to vote.
Miss Durgan?
Hale, you're on mute.
Sorry. We're tabling this makes me sad.
Say yes.
Didn't sound like Hillary's voice.
Still waiting, Hale.
Are you voting?
You're on mute.
Am I on mute now?
No.
No.
Oh, well, I wasn't before either. I said it makes me sad, but yes.
Thank you.
Mrs. Giftos.
Yes.
Dr. Gill.
Yes.
Miss Casalonis.
Yes.
Miss Layton.
Yes.
Mrs. Seither.
Yes.
Mrs. Turner.
Yes.
Miss Caldwell.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
All good with me.
Thank you.
Okay, 8.4, 8.5. I'm going to move this into one motion to accept the meeting minutes for the business meeting of February 27th and of March 5th as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Ready to vote?
Miss Durgan.
Yes.
Mrs. Giftos.
Yes.
Dr. Gill.
Yes.
Miss Casalonis.
Yes.
Miss Layton.
Yes.
Mrs. Seither.
Yes.
Mrs. Turner.
Yes.
Miss Caldwell.
Yes.
And Mr. Bennett.
Cool. Yep.
Okay, that brings us to our final item of the night.
Max, are you on a mission to say everything except the word yes tonight?
Correct.
We're looking
Just
for
trying
the
to spice
shortest
it up,
possible word, Max.
Wow.
Shortest possible.
I have a thesaurus in front of me.
Okay, quickly going into 9.0, a motion to adjourn.
Yes.
So moved. Yeah. Second.
Miss
Okay, ready
Durgan.
to vote?
Yes.
Mrs. Giftos.
Yes.
Dr. Gill.
Yes.
Miss Casalonis.
Yes.
Miss Layton.
Yes.
Mrs. Seither.
Yes.
Mrs. Turner.
Yes.
Miss Caldwell.
Yes.
And Mr. Bennett.
I'm already powering down my laptop.
There we go.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great night all.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Nick.
Happy birthday,
Happy
Nick.
birthday, Nick.
Happy birthday.
Bye.